back for another episode of the Artisans and Steel podcast. This is where I talk to some of the most talented makers in the knife making trade and craft of our times. Our guest today, for sure, is a pioneer and a leader, especially when it comes to pattern development, pattern making, mosaic, damascus, and all kinds of crazy stuff. So, we'll get to Jason in just a second. First, I want to talk about our super sponsors. First off, at the top of the list, we got Mr. Tony Sasma of TNT Forge. He's at TNT Forge on Instagram. He's a great guy, talented maker. He makes awesome chef's knives, very clean and well executed work. He does incredible handle finishing and blade and Damascus finishing. Honestly, like all together, they're really well executed pieces. Go check him out. He's a great follow. The next sponsor we got is Mr. Brian Hinnenkamp. He is Tortuga Blade Works on Instagram. He is also another good guy. He's worked with a lot of very talented makers, got some solid skills and foundation to kind of step off from, and he's doing some really cool stuff now. He's actually forging a really what is that? It's a massive cutlass, like a pirate sword almost, or saber, I guess. Maybe more so. Anyways, it's a great looking blade. It's a really cool follow. I'm looking forward to seeing how it comes together because it's massive. And outside of his sword work, he does a lot of really great Sanmai blades and hunters, and so he's definitely also another great follow. We got also Mr. Josh Weston. He is Josh A. Weston on Instagram. He's also part of at Dragon Forge Experience, where he cruises around with a buddy and they go to Renaissance fairs and they set up these forges that they've built to look like dragons. And then the forge where you're actually working out of is out of the mouth of the dragon. And so you're forging out of the fire in the mouth of the dragon. You can go and you can forge along with them. It's part of the whole Dragon Forge experience. So keep an eye on where those guys are at and touring around. They go all over the country. So go check them out and try to see if you can meet them up. Next is Mr. Michael Poor. He's Red Dragon Forge on Instagram. He's another great guy, very talented cook. He does a lot of great Japanese style or Japanese influence and Japanese style forging. He's actually working, though, on a Viking style sword right now. He just heat treated a massive blade. And I'm excited to see how that one comes together because I know what kind of a challenge those things are to build and to grind and the heat treat and all of that stuff. And so it's going to be fun to follow his build because it's going to be a good looking sword. I know it. Okay, next up is Mr. Russell Tinsley. He is Ouzelfinch Beers on Instagram. He's the owner of Ouzelfinch, which you can find on Instagram at Ouzelfinch Beers. That's OOZLEFINCH Beers. He is also Can't Make Knives on Instagram. He just started his knife making journey, and he's just getting back into forging again. He had some surgery work, and so he's healed up and he's back in the forge, getting things done. So it's fun to follow his journey and the path that he's taken, and it's really cool. And if you haven't had Ouzelfinch beers, go to your local beer market, see if they got them. If they don't got them, make sure to request them because the beers are awesomely delicious. And so go check them both out, both of those handles. And yeah, he's a good guy. Our next one is Mr. Maritime Knife Supply. That's Lawrence over at Maritime Knife Supply. He's at Maritime Knife Supply on Instagram as well as maritimenifesupply.com. He's a great guy. He actually was in my class. I taught in the middle of October up in New Hampshire. It was great to meet him in person. He's got a great philosophy about how to run his business. He doesn't have any secret codes or anything. He does everything as best as he can to keep the prices down, to help support makers. He's a maker himself. He's got supplies, basically all the kind of different supplies that you could need for making knives. He's based out of Atlantic, Canada, up in the north. I guess it would be the southeast of Canada. And but he can ship not only around Canada, but also in the US. He's got great deals, and he's got grinders, anvils, heat treating equipment, forges, all the little pins and handle materials you could ever need. Basically anything you need for making knives, he's got it. So go check him out, maritimenifesupply.com. Next we have Mr. Ben Butcher. He's Amo Bladesmithing, AMO. He's another great maker. He's actually just south of me, about 2 hours down in Portland. He's doing some really fun work. He actually, I just looked at his Instagram. He just posted up a sword he built back in May. It's a Viking style, kind of a migration period style Viking sword. Those were made from around 500 to about 1000 AD. Very cool looking blade. He also had a really fun build he did recently where he upgraded the blade in his Kershaw EDC, just a simple little folder, but he made some Damascus and made a blade out of that and put that into the Kershaw, which I thought was really cool. I like the idea of something looking seemingly very simple, but actually being very intriguing and complex on the inside. So good on you, Ben. Go check him out, Amo Bladesmithing. And last but not least, we have Gabe Fletcher. He's the owner of Anchorage Brewing, as well as Anchorage Forge on Instagram. He's also just starting his knife making journey. He comes from a background of making, though. He's a man of many talents, from carpentry and cabinetry and concrete countertop finishing and building and all kinds of stuff in between. He is also an excellent brewer. Probably one of the best beers, some of the best beers I've ever tasted in my entire life are beers that he made himself. And so go check out Anchorage Brewing on Instagram, as well as Anchorage Forge. And if you also got a local beer market, go check out Anchorage Brewing. If they see if they got some Anchorage beer, and if they don't, go ask them to get some in because they are incredible. So on to our guest. Our guest today is Mr. Jason Morrissey. He's a maker whose work I've been following for a very long time. When I first started back in, before I even started Malmasi Fire Arts in 2012, I'd already been making knives for a little while, but 2012 was when I struck out on my own, trying to figure out how to get back into knife making. And while I was doing that, I was Google searching all over the place, looking at interesting stuff and work people were doing. And early on, after I got started, in the first couple of years, Jason's work, he often goes by Jay. Jay's work is and the patterns he was making were some of the most unique and confounding patterns that I'd ever seen, because I'd never seen anything like them. He's using a lot of very unique approaches and not tips, but techniques to create his patterns that I'm getting more familiar with understanding how they can be approached, but still he is definitely one of the leaders. In fact, part of the reason I had him in the Artisans of Steel calendar for 2022 is because I feel like he is really pioneering in his approach to creating patterns. He is definitely outside of the box, but he doesn't only make Damascus or knives. He also makes hammers. Works with glass. He's a man of many talents, and I'm excited to have him in here. I'm gonna pull him in right now. What's up, bud? How are you doing today?
Hey, what's up, buddy?
You're joining us from Maine. How's the weather up there? Is it getting chilly and snowy yet?
Oh, it's miserable. It's really it's coming down. It's raining today. It's
Okay.
very gray, but I'm crossing my fingers for the snowfall soon.
Right. Jeez. Yeah, I remember what it was like in Connecticut, and so you're closer to the coast though, I think, than I was when I was in Connecticut. So you probably get a bit more rain than snow, like we do actually where I'm at over here in Washington. We get more water than snow, but yeah, the cold is not fun to work in. So,
Oh,
and I'm sure you feel that pain for sure.
yep, I bailed from the shop to come home and do this interview at my house. Thanks for your flexibility.
No, absolutely. I want you to be comfortable. I want this to be a good time and a good conversation. So get as comfortable as you can. If you got some PJs you want to slip in,
Uh,
you're good.
yeah, I'm
We can
totally in
pause
my
this real
underwear
quick.
right now.
You
Yeah,
got some fluffy slippers. Let's do it.
that's right.
Um, so you are I think what's really interesting about this knife making craft is that so many of us come from so many different backgrounds. Like before I got into knife making, I worked in restaurants. One of the last restaurants I worked in, I was just a prep cook and a dishwasher, right? And then I got into knife making. You never would have told me that I would be where I'm at now, and me believe you um, when I was standing in that dish pit, scrubbing on pots and pans and cleaning up after other people's messes, basically. And while we have interacted quite a bit through social media and met recently when me and my family were up in the Northeast,
Mhm.
um, I don't really know your story, which is I think is really great for this podcast interviews because I get to learn along with the audience about where you come from, like what's your background, what are some yeah, what are some of your early influences you're obviously an incredibly creative person. Where did that kind of first start to show up in your life, and then how did that progress to kind of where you got to now?
So, I mean, I guess, my first experience making something, I was raised in Vermont. I'm from Bristol, Vermont,
Okay.
and um, I was raised single parent by my mom, and with a huge family. She's got 13 siblings, Irish
Oh,
Catholic
holy
family,
smokes. Yeah.
and just I think at one point when my mom was living with an art school teacher, I think I started making some clay sculptures, and I think that really kind of stimulated something in me, and eventually I started you know taking as many art classes as possible, and in high
Mm.
school, and um I don't know, I've always been drawn to making stuff. I've always been, I think I think there was a huge uh you know I- I'm super influenced by movies, and Raiders of the Lost Ark and Jim Henson, Dark Crystal, and Star Wars, and all these you know miniature effects and stuff like that, and people creating things from different cultures, or these alien cultures or whatever. And
Sure.
I just really like that. I like Indiana Jones, and hieroglyphs, and doing like certain things in caverns and stuff like that. I just remember a lot of that stuff being just so mind blowing, and just interesting, and archaeology, and all that. So I kind of, I knew from an early start that I wanted to get into making objects, and um, yeah, and I guess the movies, and and stuff like that really had a big influence on me when I was younger, along with being exposed to different artists as well. But
Sure.
but yeah, so coming from Vermont, I think I ended up transferring, or I'm sorry, uh, going to high school there at Mount Abraham, Union High School in Bristol, Vermont. And then I believe my first year, I knew I wanted to get into some kind of art. So I think I had photography in mind, thinking I needed to get, a paying job, not just, be a two-dimensional artist,
You're
or
gonna become Peter Parker.
yeah, I thought fashion. I was thinking maybe,
Okay.
I was associating maybe photography with money, and I think my goal was set to go and study photography. So I got accepted to Montserrat College of Art down in Massachusetts,
Okay.
and just kind of put my head down and focused on foundation, which is 3D, 2D, sculpture, and all that stuff. I realized I wasn't really vibing with Massachusetts, so I ended up transferring to Portland School of Art. It was the last year. It was Portland School of Art, and at that time, Tim McRae was the head of the metalsmithing and jewelry department, and
Okay.
along with Alan Perry, which is a holoform metalsmith from New Hampshire, and just studied under awesome people there. Kate Wolf, um, a wax carving pioneer, and then I was introduced to Haystack
Sure.
School of Arts up in Deer Isle, and just notice, and I think I started just taking a bunch of extra classes up there, um, focusing on blacksmithing and small scale metals and glasswork as well. So, I was very fortunate to kind of have this art background, and be exposed to these craft centers. And I think I really started vibing with workshops and stuff, and just kind of put myself into as many workshops, trying to build my skill set, um, while I was at Maine College of Art studying metalsmithing and jewelry with Tim
Mhm.
McRae and Alan Perry. Um, and yeah, I mean, that's kind of the long and the short of it. Sorry to.
Right. No, that's great. I love that you brought up your love for archaeology, especially. For me, my I have kind of I didn't know I was very artistic at all until I think I was like either 7 or 8. I was in second grade, and we were doing a Egypt kind of portion of the like learning. I can't remember what they call it, but they're like little learning block about different cultures and stuff like that in history. And part of it, like, they team up with the art teacher, and so part of that with the art teacher was we were doing enlargements of these images, and we were going to make like human size, like images of Osiris and Isis and stuff like that. And I had Horus was mine. And and what we were doing, so first we had to draw the thing, and then we were gonna basically make a projected image. So they were gonna put it in onto a projector, and then you do the whole, like, enlarge the outline and stuff like that, doing it that way. And I did almost an exact copy of the image, and I was just drawing like I just what I thought I was supposed to be doing, and somebody walked by, and they were basically the kid version would be like, "Oh my gosh," but the teacher too was basically like, "Holy shit," because I don't think I'd ever like displayed any artistic talent before in any way.
What
Uh,
what is Horus the god of?
oh
Is he?
god, I believe Horus was the son of Osiris and Isis,
Uh,
and he. I can't remember about Horus, what he
yeah,
what he
yeah,
does exactly.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. I've heard
but
his name.
yeah, I think 'cause Set's the underworld, and Horus was something like I don't know if he was, like, somewhat oppositional to Set,
Hmm.
in a way, but I don't know if he was, like, he transported you up to heaven or whatever. They believe in heaven in Egyptian culture, but, uh, anyways, and what was kinda sad about that is, like, that was one of the last things I did before I moved and I left that school, and I went to another school, like, the next week, and I never got that piece back. And so I still have, like, memories of drawing that thing, but it got lost, and my teacher was, like, so stoked on it. She was just like, "I need to, like, protect this so nobody else takes it," and then I never got it back. My fucking teacher stole my artwork.
Yeah, it's crazy how just how you can really just with a small bit of encouragement you can really just help direct somebody into one area of study,
Sure.
especially at such a young age. I really I I owe so much to my art teachers
Right.
and people who have influenced me
Yeah.
throughout my.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and part of the I mean, I bring that up because it sounds like your start was somewhat similar. It's like there was nothing really I'm sure you did like arts and crafts and stuff, but there wasn't really anything outstanding or really anything that maybe like you really jived with until that one pivotal moment, and then you're like, "Whoa, this is my thing." And
Yeah.
then you obviously it sounds like you just took and ran with it. And I love that you also brought up like Jim Henson and Dark Crystal and stuff like that because we come from I'm 38 and you're a few years older than me, but we come from a time where a lot of visual effects when we were growing up in movies was a lot of stop action or claymation or puppeteering. And so there was like you had to play with this kind of even as watching it still as adults, it's making these basically like puppets or these fake things, these created things, these sculptures come to life in creating life in them, and then for them to take on a role as a character in a movie, it's so different from even like our buddy Will Brigham. Like he's what is he? I think he's only like 5 or 6 years younger than me. I don't think he's really seen many of that much of that stuff, and so he, things started like animation started to get a little bit more sophisticated. A lot of 3D rendered stuff, CGI stuff started to play more. Um, and so but when started talking about, Jim Henson and Dark Crystal and all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff, like that was instantly what I popped in my head. It's like, yeah, and a lot of those things used to be kind of dark, you
Oh,
know,
yeah.
kind of taking a page, honestly, from like Grimm's fairy tales. Like the they were story Grimm's fairy tales were what they were stories of warning, basically, and they were
Yeah.
like they would talk about kids getting eaten by witches and shit like that, right?
Oh, yeah.
And people dying left and right, and so it's interesting how yeah, it used things. I feel like those kind of influences, those creative influences, used to be a little bit darker, and now they're a little fluffier,
Oh, yeah.
little friendlier. But I can see that when I think now when I kind of close my eyes and think about your patterns, I see even some of like I could see how the artwork for like Alien or something like that really kind of like plays into the way the lines move and the position you put them in and kind of organize those patterns and to create a similar kind of skeletal armor kind of alien effect too, and sometimes, and I think that's
Absolutely.
really cool.
Absolutely. And I think like, I think it's being recognized. I mean, that stuff was all handmade stuff,
Right.
and
Yeah.
I think they're even starting to realize, yeah, the CGI stuff now is just, I mean, it just kind of looks fake and like, I don't know, like too polished or whatever. But
Right.
I feel like with some of the new shows and stuff coming out, they are recognizing the handmade quality, like House of Dragons and stuff like that. I
Right.
mean, so
That's exactly what I was thinking about.
you watch all the backgrounds of that, and now they're recognizing. I mean, they're obviously spending huge money on all the, and even the cups and the chalices and you know the swords, of course, and
Right.
they're concerned about that, the details, and
Right.
I think the CGI era, I'm hoping is kind of dissipating a little bit, because I just
Sure.
think that the handmade quality in film is just super inspirational.
Yeah, and I can see where CGI still has a place, especially when it comes to like vast landscapes and backgrounds and stuff like that.
Yeah,
But yeah, it is really, really hard to replicate the texture um and the look of real things versus CGI. And CGI is really good and can be fucking incredible, but it also requires a lot of time and effort and talent to create those things, and that costs a lot of money as well. And so I think it's cool to that they are. I see that too. Like I think they recognize directors and studios recognize that there's a lot of value in having kind of like those tangible assets,
hmm,
basically. And obviously, like the CGI stuff are still assets that could be used elsewhere, but to have something in that's like real world and you can do a touring exhibition or something like that from like they did for like Game of Thrones and a lot of that, it's really cool to see that stuff and to
about
see that crafts people are being relied upon again in a big way to create like to just really make it real instead of just a bunch of cheap shit, you know?
absolutely.
Yeah. So so you're going to school in Portland and you're doing jewelry art, or metalsmithing and blacksmithing. You also have a background with glass. Can you
Mhm.
talk about your glass work?
Yeah, so
Or
I think,
and where does that fall like in line with everything else?
well, I mean, it's pretty important,
Mhm.
Um, I I think I took a class up at Haystack, or I think I snuck into a class up at Haystack with Christina Logan, and she's a glass bead
That's a
maker.
strong move.
I
That's a
think
strong move.
out of New Hampshire,
Yeah.
and I think I made my first glass bead with her at Haystack, maybe late '90s, early 2000s, and
Okay.
um, And then I believe so. I, geez, that might have been actually closer to maybe 97 or 98. I believe early 2000s. I graduated with my BFA in metalsmithing and jewelry in 98. And I think, yeah, I started up working for a large scale glass blower doing soft glass, furnace glass
Okay.
in um, uh, around 99,
Hmm.
2000. And I think I assisted my buddy Ernie Paterno for, maybe 2 or 3 years. And throughout that process, I was able to kind of explore Millefiori and
Oh,
Marini
nice.
and
Yeah.
cane work. And I was particularly interested in cane work, pastorelli work out of the glory hole, which is basically putting a bunch of milli or cane on a flat pallet, sticking that in the glory hole, and then just very gently smushing that together and
Right.
doing something that's called a roll up. And then you'd roll up the cane or you'd roll up all the little slices of milli and
Sure.
blow that out. You'd roll it up into a tube and blow that out.
Can we pause for a second? Just real quick. I'm familiar with these things, but can you explain a little bit about the cane work and what the millefiori is and all of that?
Okay, yeah, yeah. Millefiori work is just basically, imagine making a bullseye, let's say red color, and then encasing that with black, and then encasing that with a clear, and
Mhm.
then you know, and then rolling that up, and then stretching that out into a big long length of material, and then slicing that up until you have multiple little discs of them, and that would be called a millefori or a marini.
Mhm.
Um, and I believe it's an Italian glass technique, and
Mhm.
and all those little pieces will get put on a flame retardant type board and heated up in a glory hole, and once those things start kind of becoming liquid, they're squeezed together, um, and then uh, basically you take a tube, attach a little bit of glass on it, and roll it up into a tube-like shape.
Right.
All those bullseyes would be visible as individual bullseyes going around that tube.
Right.
It's kind of hard to explain without a visual
Sure.
uh, guide, but
Yeah.
and then very similar thing. If you're doing cane work, just like a candy cane, a twisted piece of
Right.
color, um, basically start off with a couple lines on a big piece of glass, and then using a drill or having two people spin that piece of material until it forms like a length or a pencil thick piece of candy cane stripes. Those are then put down on the pastorelli as well, and just smushed together, um, and then rolled up and blown out into a vessel of
Right.
sorts.
So,
Um,
like, kind of my quick and dirty explanation is like, uh, it's if you've ever seen saltwater taffy, it's basically glass form saltwater taffy,
yeah,
where the discs of saltwater taffy have like maybe it's pink on the outside, and then it's white, and then it's got these different shapes and colors on the inside. It looks just like that, but it's glass. They're small, and if people want to check it out, it's spelled Millefiore, and I can't remember what the website is. Uh, oh, there is a website. I believe it's the Mille Fiori Fiori.com, and they got tons of pictures and videos of their process and doing that. And I think that's really cool. And you're right. I did do a little bit of research a while back. It is an Italian technique. I believe it's believed to have originated at around 50 BC, and had a long run, and then either the school or whoever, that knowledge and that technique, a lot of those crafts were passed down orally. They're oral traditions. There probably weren't even any illustrations because they it was trade secrets. It was really important that people kept this to themselves because that way you continue to have business, which is understandable because at the time you have a limited quantity of people who, first off, can even afford it, and then second off, who are interested in it. And so they controlled it for a long time, and then it like disappeared. I think I can't remember when, but it was lost for several hundred years. And then an Italian glassmaker in, I believe, the 1200s kind of rediscovered it and figured out the techniques for making it again. And has been I think it's been rolling since then. And but it still is kind of, I mean, it's a little better well known now, but
Mhm.
still for a while it was pretty protected.
Well, in general, I mean, when I
Yeah,
first started getting into glass, I mean, everybody was just very protective
sure.
of their techniques and secrets, and it was a little off-putting.
Right.
Um,
Well, and you
uh,
were doing it at the time too when like Chihuly was big.
yes,
And there were like very few schools in the United States and even around the world. And it's like you had to go to like a like a special place in Italy on a very small island or something like that to go learn this craft.
yeah.
And yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. It is just awesome. And what I really liked about soft glass was, working in my small scale metals jewelry studio.
Hmm.
I was just working alone a lot of the time,
Sure.
and then if you're ever in a soft glass studio, there's usually somebody. There's usually an assistant, and you're kind of vibing with another person and working with that person to
Right.
get this piece as quickly into the furnace as possible or into the kiln as possible.
Sure.
Uh, so I love the team, the the bonding between two people and
Sure.
the teamwork involved in that. And then I think I started doing flame working a little bit more, which was something that um, I was soft glass working beads originally before the soft glass out of the furnace work.
Can I ask
Uh,
you a quick question just
yeah,
for
yeah.
clarity's sake? What is soft glass and how does that vary from other techniques?
So soft glass is usually done out of a furnace. It's soda lime glass. It's traditional glass blowing. And I applied that when I first started. You can get soft glass. You can use soft glass in a flame as well to make beads. But then uh, as I think more a more another type of glass came about, which is considered more of a hard glass, which is borosilicate or Pyrex, and that is more
Okay.
of that needs to be worked in a flame at higher temperatures.
Okay.
And soft glass is traditional glass, um, and then borosilicate is more scientific glass, cookware,
Like
uh,
engineered glass.
paraphernalia.
Yeah.
It can withstand heat fluctuation. Um, you can, yeah, yeah, you can literally put a flame under it and boil water or whatever in it, and it'll cool down and it won't explode like soft
Right.
glass might. Um,
Right. Interesting.
so yeah, so I guess after I had that experience with soft glass or furnace work, I started working borosilicate, and back then it was like, I mean, I guess, early 2000s, um, there was a big kind of explosion of paraphernalia and stuff. And I was fortunate to work with a lot of paraphernalia makers, some big names, Steve Bates and Mr. Gray and all that. And but I never really felt comfortable, calling myself a paraphernalia maker. And so I made a lot of functional sculptural objects. I don't know if you pulled up any of those images.
Yeah, I do have some. And really quick, when you're talking about paraphernalia, you're talking like pipes and other maybe smoking devices.
Yeah, smoking devices for tobacco or marijuana.
Sure.
You know, it it just was, you know, uh, it was it was it was just a really great period of time to be working in borosilicate because there was kind of It was a lot of those, a lot of the pipe makers out there just were really kind of breaking ground, um, with different types of filterization
Sure.
things, bubs and all that stuff. And
Right.
um, but it was also a weird time, like federally there was issues with
Sure.
pipe making and stuff like that, and people had to go, with aliases, and I never felt comfortable giving myself an alias, and I never
Right.
really felt comfortable calling myself a pipe maker. And so a lot of my objects back then, they were functional, but it was really just about aesthetics.
Okay.
Functionality was important, but I really like disguising my objects. And I also,
Right.
spend a lot of time making, marbles and beads, and trying to incorporate cabochons in my work. I did a lot of vessels with glass cabochons. I did a lot of high 24 karat fuming. Yes, there's some of those cabochons. Um,
So, real quick, what's a cabochon? That's like these discs?
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
okay.
So gemstones are usually categorized in faceted gemstones, and then
Okay.
cabochons, which are just kind of polished round.
Okay.
Um,
I didn't know that.
yep. And these objects right here, um, it gave me a little, a different. It gave me something to work with in my jewelry.
Sure.
That kind of set myself aside from other people, and I was super fortunate. Back then, there was lots of jewelry books and coffee table books. Lark Books did a bunch of, 1,000 rings, and
Oh, wow.
500 wedding bands, 500 glass objects. And I was fortunate to get into a few of those books. And this is before the internet, and I mean, well,
For sure.
when it was forming and stuff like that.
Right.
Um, but it was really great. It was awesome just to get published in a lot of
Yeah,
those.
publication was king,
Yeah.
right, at the time.
Yeah. I mean, it was really.
Yeah, it's, what is it? I remember when I feel like yeah, it was probably, like, in middle school. It was, like, 97 and on. There was all of a sudden, there was, like, an explosion of all these really interesting glassworks around pipes and stuff. I had a lot of friends who smoked weed, even though it wasn't legal, and,
Mm,
but the pieces were what I was actually more interested in.
yeah.
Uh, you know, I fortunately, I live in a state where it's legal now to participate in the or dabble in the consumption of marijuana and its byproducts. But at the time, it definitely was not legal, and I think I was probably smoking the wrong strains, but I didn't enjoy it a whole ton, but I loved
Yeah.
the glasswork, and it
Mm,
always blew me away. I love going to head shops and seeing the different kind of glass pieces they had there, and it honestly, like, it's only been in the last couple of years, especially as I started to learn more about millefiori and
mhm.
how how that's made, that I started to really understand, like, how they were getting these insane patterns in the insane organization and combination of these different patterns within the one glass vessel. And it's wild because, like you're saying, it starts basically you dip the tube in, you get yourself a little bit of glass, and then that becomes kind of the scaffold for the different design patterns that go around on the outside and stuff. And some of
Yeah.
what people are doing is just fucking bonkers. I
Yeah.
actually follow a few glass makers because it's really honestly it's really inspirational.
Oh yeah.
And very it's very different, but also has some elements that cross over into metalworking. And I'm always looking for opportunities to learn more about how I can push my pattern making using things I see in nature, things I see in different disciplines. And I imagine that has played a role in how you started developing your steel patterns. But you were doing these cabochons and this glass work. And wh- when do you start? You're also already doing metalsmithing in the jewelry, but when do you start getting into steel and working steel? And how does that start up?
Well, you know, I was studying under Tim McRae, and Tim McRae wrote custom knife making book. I think in the what maybe like what late 80s or something like that.
Oh
And
wow.
it was all stock removal, '01. But there's a few different projects in that book. um, and like I said, that Tim McRae is just an amazing person, instructor, human being.
Sure.
And I was just blown away with his ability to kind of adjust for each student, and just have all these awesome projects for us. Um, so my first project with him, I think I made my first stock removal '01 knife in uh, I think '95 or '96. And I kind of it was a lot. It was all file. He made us file it, and we
Right.
had to file it and cut out the profile and harden it. And I did like an elaborate, like, you know, kind of laminate wood handle.
Okay.
And I kind of set that aside. The steel aspect of it, it was super mysterious to me. I didn't quite understand the hardening process. and
Okay.
and I got to tell you, it wasn't like until, like, I don't know, I'm just barely feeling comfortable talking about how to harden steel to people and
Sure.
describe it like I know it. So it was a mystery back then, and dealing with non-ferrous soft metals was where I was comfortable. So I kind of put that aside. But I think what ended up happening was I got into Mokame Gane,
Hmm.
and I think maybe my sophomore year in at Mecca, Main College of Art, and I think, yeah, I started actually doing millifori work in in Mokame, and Mokame was just a hassle. I don't know if you've done it before, but
I
like
haven't yet, really.
cleaning up the layers, the Steve Midget book, and I was following the Steve Midget and James Binion formulas, and taking
Sure.
pumice and having three different baths and washing the silver and the copper in
Oh
all those
man.
different baths, and wiping them down with alcohol at the end and stacking them. And it was
Hmm.
so meticulous and just over the top. But I was making some pretty decent rings. Some of them I got featured in some Lark books. And
Sweet.
then I took a Bill Farini class up at Haystack, and applied some of my millifori techniques in that class. And geez, I kind of think that was like early 2000s. I know he passed in 2011. Um, but that was kind of my first exposure to Damascus with my good buddy Steve Lebecki, a knife
Hmm.
maker and metalsmith that I studied in school with. A
Nice.
great guy. And he was making knives at the time, a little more serious than me. So took that class. Kind of was like, wow, it's so much more liberating and easy to clean up and stack, and so Bill Franey was my introduction to Damascus at Haystack. And I think that was the first time that they had a knife maker up there, um, at that craft center.
Crazy.
And
So, sorry, you said that was early 2000s.
I mean, geez, yeah, I think so. I was trying to figure that out. Um, but yeah, I think early 2000s. I know he passed in 2011. And then I think my second class was with Don Fogg on his last Damascus class at the New England School of Metalwork.
Right.
And I think after I got done with my degree at Maine College of Art, I um, I taught at the class, or I taught at the school for 8 years, doing metalsmithing and jewelry, and glass blowing and
Oh
marble
wow.
making classes and stuff like that. So I was
Yeah.
super fortunate to be able to teach at a BFA level with just my BFA. And that's, I kind of worked my way in there for TAing throughout my college career and stuff like that. But I was planning on moving out west, when I met my wife, and I think I was going to move out west, and start go to Northern California, and work with my good buddies, Scott Rosinski, Mr. Gray, and he is a pretty well-known glassblower out there.
Sure.
And and so while I was waiting for my wife to finish up with her nursing degree, I found, that's when I took that first Don Fogg class at the New England School of Metalwork, and I gave up my position at the Maine College of Art,
Oh
and
wow.
and just was like, okay, I'm just gonna focus. Look at all these awesome instructors coming through here. I mean, they were just shipping in such huge names at the
For
beginning.
sure.
Like Toby Hickman, Steve Parker. Geez, let me try to think of some of the other names, but just awesome blacksmiths and master smiths. JD Smith, I think, was my third. Damascus class, which was just really mind blowing as well.
Sure.
And yeah, I've been, just the exposure through that school just really pushed me in that direction of just kind of working more in steel. I haven't been working in glass much, and I haven't been doing that many
Hmm.
or small scale metal projects as well. Just been really into this pattern making. Um,
S- what can uh, I don't know if you can put your finger maybe on one individual thing, but obviously it's a different medium from what you've worked with before. Obviously you've done some metalsmithing, but steel's moves different from non-ferrous metals or glass. And then yeah, and then just what was it? Oh, and it being easier to kind of clean up versus the Mokame and put back
yeah.
together. But what was it about like the mosaic, or not, sorry, mosaic, but just Damascus pattern welding and forging that really captured you and just made you just like quit your job at the school, which sounds like ideal situation for somebody who just finished and got their BA or BFA,
Mhm.
and then teaching at the school for 8 years and then just saying, I'm going this way. Like, what was that?
I mean, I think I just really I was just really intrigued and really turned on to the fact that I could just make these functional objects. And yeah, of course, in glass I was making functional, more ritualistic type objects. Like I
Sure.
like that aspect of it, but
Right.
I also just had like, my collection of glass just like accidentally get knocked off of the shelf, and like and
Right.
and just I kind of
Damn
just
cat.
it was just so, yeah, just brittle. and
Hmm.
and I like the permanence. I like the idea of
I
making
got you.
some kind of like artifact of my existence. You know what I mean?
Right.
And
Yeah.
um and I hope that doesn't sound too weird.
No,
I
no,
mean,
no. I
uh,
I I have the same thought. Right
yeah.
now, one of the hashtags I like to use is future antiques of America or something like that. Like what we are making, like we have in museums, we have pieces that are even bronze pieces that are like 5,000 years old or something like that, right?
Mhm.
3,000 years old.
Yeah.
There's iron pieces, Iron Age pieces that are a couple thousand years old, you know, carbon
Yeah.
steel stuff from the Middle East that's this insane woots, this crucible steels that are, you know, thousands of years old. Like,
Yeah.
and that far outlives anybody. And so we really are making artifacts. We're we are making things that will that as long as they're in the right environment, of course, they could rust away if they're in the wrong environment. But if they end up in a peat bog somewhere, they'll probably be safe.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
can
they
last
should
forever.
technically outlive us.
Yeah.
And I don't know, that was just that's kind of cool. That's pretty empowering.
Yeah.
And um and then just on top of that, I think I don't I I guess I'd have I have I make knives. Have I ever really called myself a knife maker? I guess so, maybe, but I'm constantly learning. I like, in the in the beginning, how you want to make that big, thick, knife, and just like substantially hold it in our hands, and it just feels
Right.
like so much mass. But yeah, as I'm making more knives and studying under just really, awesome makers, I'm going thinner with my blades, and so I've never felt comfortable. I'm constantly learning, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Sure.
Um, and and I've been super fortunate to put myself in positions where I'm studying and working with, like, my idols that I've been looking at in Blade magazine and stuff. And
Right.
And I've been able to kind of take classes and study under all those people, Stu Schwarzer and Delana and, Jim Kroll and Tim Portier and Kevin Cashin, all
Right.
those people I've just been, super fortunate to be exposed to and been able to kind of allocate time and money to put towards that. And I just feel like it's just been a huge asset. And, uh, a lot of people, I've gone broke by taking classes, but
Sure.
I feel like by, building relationships and stuff like that, it's really helped out the career, and
Absolutely.
and like I said, it's put me in a position to be able to work with people that I've idolized since I was a preteen, you know.
Yeah. It's cool that basically it seems like you when you were doing your glass and your metalsmithing and at Mecca, you've kind of maintain that a similar approach. You just transferred it over to steel and knife making and steel making and blacksmithing, and now you're doing the same thing again. Now you're teaching courses up there, as well as continuously learning. And I agree. I think that's one of the greatest things about this craft. And if you're gonna go far and keep going and keep pushing yourself and what you understand and what other people generally understand about pattern making, bladesmithing, knife making, you got to be willing to humble yourself and be willing to learn, because if you're not willing to learn or to make a mistake, you're honestly just stifling yourself and your potential, and how far you can go. And I think that's really, as talented as you are, I think it's really great that you are still willing to put yourself in that position to make a mistake or to step outside of your comfort zone. I think that's where um those that growth occurs, right? You got to get outside of your comfort zone.
Absolutely, absolutely. I yeah. I mean, I, I definitely, you know, the whole even calling myself a teacher is kind of weird to me.
Sure.
I I prefer to use the word instructor,
Sure.
and I like to, even calling myself an artist kind of feels a little weird. So I yeah, of course you have to stay humble in life, and you have to, um, I mean, it is weird. I've encountered certain bladesmiths who, they're just like, why would I take that class? I already know how to do this. And I mean, I don't know, it's like I can't believe how many different approaches I've seen and refined my techniques by just making or taking a class, um, by someone who's taken a different approach to a different
Sure.
the same style of knife that I might be making. But geez, I mean, uh, you're really closing yourself off if you think that you know everything. And
You're
um,
doing yourself a disservice,
yeah,
honestly.
and yeah, and that you're not going to benefit. But I think what's been great is also just meeting other people, and taking a class and kind of just I definitely have, a problem focusing myself. And if
Mm.
you've seen my studio, you've seen all the half
Yeah, it
finished
looks like mine.
stuff. Uh, but uh, but um, you know setting yourself aside, giving yourself time to take a class and kind of approaching it, um, uh, just it helps me focus on a certain project in a certain time frame. And then on top of that, just meeting all the same people who are that into that type of a class and can afford
Mhm.
that time. It's just super valuable to meet, all the students and see how they're approaching the techniques that are being presented as well. So
Right. Like we started out, I mean, part of what I was saying is like we all come from these various backgrounds, and I think we all have these various perspectives that, because of those backgrounds, that help us do really interesting stuff, right? And but not to keep beating a dead horse, but just that, you know, yeah, like if you for any reason start to believe that your view, your vision, and your perspective how things work is so narrow-minded and closed off that, you just basically think you're the shit. You can't learn anything from anybody. You're again, you're just hurting yourself. I part of part of why I was doing patterned welded Wednesdays or sharing other aspects about my knife making, whether it's S grinding or making sayas and stuff like that.
Mm.
I'm sure there are plenty of people who understand or could figure that out on themselves on their own, or maybe there aren't, or people know how they see that and they're like, oh, that's great. But I think because of their background, I think I could do this little thing different and it could make it easier or more interesting or whatever. And I think that's one of the greatest opportunities in this craft, in this work, is that that people do come from those different backgrounds, but also because of just like this communal aspect to it, that they're also willing to turn around and share back and cross reference ideas, and kind of do roundtables. And I think, like you were saying, one of the greatest values of taking some of these classes is meeting these other people and seeing their other approaches, and as well as developing relationships with not only with them but the instructors as well. You can talk to people through social media all day long, but
Mm.
it's not the same as meeting them in person, and developing those relationships in person, and also kind of the camaraderie, so that if somewhere down the road you're working on something and I know that you can help me, then I'm going to reach out to you because we already got a thing going, and that it's only going to help me to humble myself and do that. I took a class at New England School of Metalwork. I took the introduction to bladesmithing class,
Mhm.
and I'd already been forging integral knives for 2 years at that point, right?
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
what I got a lot of great value out of that class. I got a lot of great value from meeting the other people and the instructor. Meeting
Right.
Derek Glazer, who runs at New England School of Metalwork. It was a really great class, and I keep those relationships up. And I
Yeah.
think anybody who might be thinking that they want to take a class, they really ought to, even if they think, I'm past that already.
Absolutely.
There's still something to learn. If you're paying attention, there's always something to learn.
Who'd you
So
take that class with, Marcus?
Steve Culver was my teacher, and
Oh.
actually part of the reason I took it from Steve Culver is because he comes from a machinist background,
Mhm.
and I definitely do not. And so I wanted to see his take on making knives from that paradigm, his perspective, as well as just to meet him in general. And I thought I still maybe down the road might be doing frame handled Bowie knives and stuff like that. I haven't really gotten delved into that, but I know that he is a resource that I could lean on in the future if I do need some help with some of that, because he does fucking phenomenal, clean, well executed work. His precision, yeah, I think that was it. He comes from a perspective of precision, where I come from I'm just like, I'm kind of shooting from my hip. I'm doing a lot of things by eye. I'm not really measuring things all the time.
Yeah.
Um, and so, but I do think that there is a lot of great value in having those other skills. And I didn't really have a place to really step off and start learning them. And part of me taking that class was to develop that relationship with him, so that potentially could be a thing down the road.
Yeah, he's an excellent human being
Yeah.
and maker. I was fortunate to take one of his classes as well.
Nice. Yeah. And what is it? I think a couple years ago you were naming off a bunch of people you've taken classes with. I think it was a couple years ago, maybe longer, but you did a class with Bill Burke. Bill Burke was up teaching,
Oh
and
yeah.
you guys did some fun stuff. I think combining some of your guys' individual techniques into basically kind of collaborative work, which was really really cool to see, and using some different techniques that um I'd kind I even myself personally I hadn't done, but I've kind of like thought, oh, that might be interesting, but how the fuck would you do that? And then I see like you guys doing that stuff. I'm like, yes, that's it. That's totally how you would approach that. That's super smart,
Yeah.
and I loved it. It was
Yeah,
very
that
cool.
class was nuts.
Yeah.
It was just yeah, exploring the feather pattern,
Hmm.
exploring triangle dies, which
Right.
really just like offset was just a whole nother way of incorporating my, or just putting that little bit of distortion
Right.
into a restackable pattern. that really in the end you kind of look at and you go, how is that made, so Bill has most of that steel. I just poked him a little bit just to be like, hey man, like you gonna like all that stuff is like kind of still being unexplored, but there's
Right,
some really just I'm super proud of that work. Yeah, Bill and Rick Dunkerley, I mean,
right.
you know uh yeah, just amazing makers, and
Yeah.
just everything that comes out of their mouth, all the advice that they've given me has just been like really mind-blowing. I mean, those very fortunate to have friended both of those makers, and
Right,
and
right.
yes, and that class was in particularly very over the top awesome, and it was great to meet Bill
Yeah.
through that experience.
Bill is a talented guy, and yeah, when I was watching that, I was definitely feeling the FOMO because I love working with Bill. He's got a very uh, interesting perspective. He's got a great story. I want to get him on the podcast
Oh yeah.
in probably in the next few months. And but he's also he can be gruff, but he's
Mhm.
also a fucking great human being. I
Oh
love
yeah.
him.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, if you can, I mean, I know with family, it's difficult to get out and travel around, but
Mhm.
getting over and working with him at his shop is a lot of fun. He's got a
Oh yeah.
great setup
Yeah.
and a great place. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I was fortunate to take a Rick Dunkerley and Bill Burke liner lock class that was mind blowing out in Idaho.
Oh, you did go. Oh,
Yes.
nice.
Yep.
That's fucking great. That's so
Yeah,
good.
it was pretty over the top as well.
Yeah.
Uh, yep. Those guys are just uh, definitely uh, those guys are top shelf individuals for sure.
Right. Yeah, and I love that. I I love seeing melding of the minds like that because you are incredibly talented, and your perspective is, I feel like, is very unique, and your take and your approach are very unique. And I think it's really cool to see your I think what was really cool is just to see your guys' worlds collide, because I guarantee he also took a lot away from that interaction as well.
Oh yeah.
um yeah, and
Yeah.
yeah,
It was
yeah,
yeah, it was a crazy experience. I'm sure you'll be seeing some steel from that
nice.
experience. You saw some cross sections, I'm pretty sure, that like on Instagram.
Yes,
But yeah, I'm really excited to see some finished product from that.
for sure. Um, well, and so that kind of talking about kind of those melding in minds and kind of playing outside of the box is, I wanted to ask you kind of like what were some of your early inspiration, because I'm sure you started out with conventional Damascus, just like random patterns, twist patterns, and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And when was it when you kind of started stepping outside of that, and or I guess maybe what were some influences or past experiences that influenced your approach that a lot of people are commonly seeing now from you and your work? Not
What-
necessarily specific techniques, but just like some of the inspirations that kind of pushed you in that direction, to start playing with the way you approach things now.
Um, Geez, I mean, well, like I said, it was kind of weird. What brought me into it was I was doing some mosaics in
Okay.
in Mokume, so
Okay.
it was kind of weird. I mean, I started off just, um, I kind of started off with those same mosaic techniques coming into it. Um, I do more simple, like I do simpler patterns, like my random kind of raindrop on top
Sure.
of raindrop. I try to get those raindrops to look like they're pulling apart in kind of
Mhm.
like a cell division thing, maybe mitosis
Oh
type
yeah, sure.
thing. But yeah, I don't know. I um you know it I've just, I don't think there was anything that pushed me in that direction for mosaics, because I started off with mosaics, I guess, in some
Okay.
aspect. But but instruction in general, like I said, I think after that Don Fog class, I was exposed to Rick Dunkerley in a Damascus class, and then I went out after a Rick Dunkerley class and studied under Steve Schwarzer and Rick Furr
Mm,
out of Wisconsin,
okay.
and I think that's I think the combination of just all those classes kind of close together um, uh, just got me really jazzed. And then I think shortly after that trip out to work on Rick Furr's large hammer, I acquired my Yin Yang 165,
Right.
and and I was able to kind of piece things together. Up until then, I was working on a 50-pound tire hammer and a 25-ton Uncle Al's press.
Okay.
But getting that hammer allowed me to work larger scale and kind of go a little bit go a little bit deeper. I think one thing that I'm exploring right now that that's a little more recognizable is my varying line work,
Hmm.
varying thickness in line, and that's just kind of I'm just trying to achieve um, the illusion of depth through
Sure.
foreground, midground, and background lines,
Okay.
um, and um, and I think
Would something like this be along the lines of what you're talking about?
well, no, that was kind of um, that right there is a four-way mosaic, and I really started exploring those really heavily after a Rick Dunkerley class,
Okay.
um, and I was really just about getting that precision four-way, all those lines to come together nice and crisp in the middle.
Right.
Um, right now, I guess what I'm talking about is kind of my newer images where they're kind of pieces of mosaic that have been sized down and then placed back in to with larger pieces or bolder lines. Yes, just like that.
Okay.
um, and you know, and for a while, and I see a lot of people out there with starting off with the same size stock, um, and doing simpler patterns, and it looks great and stuff, and it's
Sure.
but it really it just took me kind of um, going in that direction, and I guess it just in glasswork as well. All my best discoveries have been from mess ups, and I think um,
Yes.
it really it kind of it frees that you up from thinking that that object is precious, and now
Mm,
you're it's lost its preciousness and you're able to do something else. I think I had a cracked marble cabochon when I was doing glass and it cracked down the center, and I ended up just kind of grabbing hold of it with tweezers and stretching it out, and
mm,
it left this crazy thing. And when I put it on my table, at some kind of craft show, like everybody was just drawn to it, and it was just it was a product of a mistake. And
right.
with some of those other mosaics,
Yeah.
the ones that you just pulled up,
Right.
where I'm isolating smaller little images in the side. I work in a 2x6 format. My all my
Okay.
stock is 2x6. So as I'm stacking and restacking and drawing things out into another piece of 2x6 to restack,
Hmm.
I'm left with a little piece at the end. You know,
Right.
like if I stack, a 4.5, 5 inch 2x6 stack, and by the time I get it down to 2x2, there's that extra material on the end.
Right.
A lot of the times that material might be distorted, or if I draw that piece of that 3 inch piece out into a 6 inch piece, that is now distorted and smushed down in some kind of orientation where it's not as intentionally made, or it looks distorted because it's been smushed down that much. Well, then, take that piece and stack it in another orientation, maybe on its side, and then smush that down with other pieces of material to kind of isolate it and make it a smaller component to go back in the 2x6 stack. I don't know
Hmm.
if that makes sense to you,
Yeah.
but it's just like using these little end pieces. And I think that's probably the most valuable thing that I'm kind of relaying in my classes, um, is freeing yourself up to not be so rigid in getting something perfect right off the bat. If something messes up, smush it in one direction, or draw it out extra long, and think about the next step where you're going to be distorting it back into a position where it's going to look intentionally placed, or intentionally with intentional distortion, I guess.
Right.
So, so
And honestly, I've said this before too, but a lot of what I know and understand about material movement and manipulation and how to intentionally distort it was from making mistakes myself. And it, I think at first for a long time, I was just like, God, fuck. And I just set it down and forget about it.
yeah.
But then I started accumulating kind of a pile of material, and then be like, all right, well, and trying to be a constant student, those mistakes uh, became a twofold lesson. First off, I had to figure out, I had a little bit of a plan, and this is what I was trying to accomplish, but that didn't happen. This other thing happened. How did that happen? What did I do to create that activity? And so figuring that out, and then now having that knowledge and understanding, turning around and figuring out how to then use those mistakes intentionally to do things deliberately or to have better control in the future. And so they played a twofold role in teaching me something. And I think, like you're saying, being willing, not being precious, and being willing to make mistakes. And obviously, sometimes it can be a major setback,
Mm,
but other times, not other times, but there's still an opportunity there. And by being a constant student and being open to learning from those mistakes, I think that's the biggest wall a lot of people put up, is like this concept of perfection, which honestly I really struggle with all the time.
mm,
But I got to do it right, or I got to nail this exact pattern, and I make mistakes all the time. And the key is turning those mistakes into lessons. There's a quote I saw the other day, and I cannot remember who said it, but failures are part of the path to success. And if you're not willing to make those mistakes or to have those failures, you're going to really struggle to grow. You're going to really struggle to progress. And honestly, yeah, I'm very thankful now for those mistakes, because I feel like I have such a depth of understanding of how material moves, that even now, even some of like your twist patterns, which are confusing as fuck, I get now. But
mhm.
that's only because I made a ton of mistakes, right? And stuff like that. So yeah, I think it's important that people take, hopefully, at least try to take that information or take that advice in, because ultimately you we learn best, and our best and greatest wisdom comes from making our mistakes. If you just cruise through life, like, you don't really learn a lot
Yeah.
until you fail. So anyways.
Yeah. Yeah, it can be stifling too. You know, what do you put out on the table, or what's acceptable as far as um what has your name on it, you know what I mean?
Sure.
I think there's that issue too, like as a maker trying to put out your best product. um you only have, I think Rick Dunkerley said you only have one chance to make your first impression, and it better be, on top of it, and your best product out on the table. So I struggle with completing projects, mostly just because um I have a fear of it's got my name on it. I gotta represent, and
Sure.
things have to be tight. But I'm also watching a lot of, like, I've seen a lot of makers just churn out stuff, and crank out product and just get better that way. Be okay with just small little things that I might fuss over,
Sure.
but still getting paid, So
Right.
I don't know if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
No, it does. And honestly, I struggle with getting things done because my favorite part is like I'm great at all the different aspects of the knife making process. But my brain is always thinking about different ways to combine different materials, build them up like you're talking about some more your more recent work where you're creating kind of that these these combinations of really fine lines and bold lines and creating this sense of depth and perspective within a basically a 2D platform, especially once it gets into blade form or something like that, or coupon shape. Um, and so, yeah, yeah, it's challenging, but yeah, you still at the end of the day, you still got I think you're in the same similar position. We both gotta get paid, and so it's like at a certain point, I gotta be good with things and just fucking move on. And if I'm not happy, then again, it's another lesson to try to learn and take and incorporate and add to my toolbox down the road, so that I can continue to improve and grow. And like I was saying, I've really struggled with the like this idea and concern of perfectionism coming from my background working for Bob Kramer. He was like he's still considered like one of the best, especially culinary knife makers in the world. And so everything um, and he really stressed to me kind of a similar idea. And I would, Rick Dunkerley and Bob Kramer are friends, and so I wouldn't be surprised that this is kind of a general ideology and philosophy that stems from a lot of their time and probably even before them. But
Yeah,
just the idea that if your name is going to go on it, you better be fucking happy to put
yeah,
your name on that, because well, first off, your name's going on it. But two, you never know who is gonna see your work.
yeah,
And then what are they're gonna see the work, and they're gonna see your name on it. And if there's some weird discrepancy or something about that, and they're gonna be like, wait a second. I thought he's supposed to be like blah blah whatever, this kind of incredible, crazy, awesome maker. And then, but what's this thing or what's that thing? And
yeah,
so I really struggle to get things out because I'm constantly fussing over them,
yeah,
trying to make sure that there isn't that kind of shit. But at the end of the day, you can only just try to continue to learn and get stuff out, get paid, continue
mm,
to learn, and continue down your path and figure things out. If things didn't go the way you wanted them to go exactly, still try to take a lesson out of it. You know, I'm right there
absolutely.
with you, man.
Yeah.
When I'm curious, because I feel like the way like these examples we've just been talking about,
Mm.
that this kind of is there some glasswork inspiration in there, especially from the Mille Fiori, where you're kind of like puzzling things together in a way that is a technique that you brought to your Damascus making or mocha? Were you doing this kind of stuff in Mokame as well before you started doing steel?
Yes. Uh,
I don't
a
think
little
I've seen
fun.
is do you have pictures of that somewhere? I've never seen it. I don't
Jeez.
I just looked through all of your pictures on Facebook and I didn't see anything like that, especially out of Mokame.
Oh
Um,
man.
unless I missed it. Um,
Um, let me you know, I might have to use the facilities in a second. Maybe I'll go grab the book downstairs and bring it back up.
mm,
Um, but I believe it's featured in a 500 wedding bands is where it's featured. It might
okay,
be on my website, maybe in the backlog of stuff.
I
But
see.
yeah, it was basically stacked uh, um, mocha megane, then sliced billet, and then restacked again, and it was the beginning of my patterns that I'm doing. But it was very basic, so there was only like two extra pieces of restacked material in
I
it.
got you.
But yeah, I mean, you know, when I was looking and working in glass and studying, cane pickup and roll up techniques,
Yeah.
a lot of people were doing a lot of cold working and
Oh,
actually
interesting.
grinding into twisted cane.
Oh,
And
crazy.
if you see like some opaques and translucent colors that have been twisted up and then ground into, that's basically where I got, my idea for exploding or cutting up my pieces. And I think
Right.
JD Smith taught me the explosion technique, where it was
Okay.
just a twisted piece and then cutting it and exploding it. And it was interesting. I interpreted it a little bit different than
Right.
how he was teaching it as an exploded pattern. I've done a lot of like book matching after cutting and bisecting my twist.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but there was a conversation I had with him where he's like, I didn't really teach you to do it that way. And I can't remember what the difference of it was. I think when I first started doing it, I was exploding it, which means cutting it down the very center of the
Right.
twist and then flipping it back to back, so
Right.
that twist pattern's down the core of it.
Right.
But I can't remember how he was trying to explain how, but it was a different take on it than his
Okay.
explosion. I haven't chatted with JD in a while, but I intend to reach out to him
Sure.
shortly.
Okay, you run away. I'll chat to the audience for a second here.
Okay, let me go to the bathroom. I'll be right back.
All right, sounds good. All right, audience. I'm talking to you now. Thank you for the great questions. We will get to these towards the end. Um, and whoever's, I see a couple people in here. Is that still you, Brian and Mr. Michael Poor, Brian Hinnenkamp? Yeah, thank you for the questions. Yeah, we'll definitely get to those. Those are great questions. It's crazy looking at his stuff. I'm trying to actually, I have a ton of photos here that we'll go through. But yeah, his approach and also the way he collaborates with makers. Actually, this Kiridashi is probably one of the first pieces I ever saw of Jason's work where I was just like, what the fuck is going on there? And it's crazy because it looks like, I cannot remember the name of the artist, but they used to do, I think they did a lot of artwork for aliens. But this looks like an image of, say, like a cadaver that had been like the skin pulled back, and this sounds really gross, but the skin pulled back and you can see all kind of like the working parts and the bones and stuff like that in there. And I was just like, holy shit, I had never seen anything like it before. And after this first piece, I was just like, who is this guy? What is he doing? And then obviously he's done tons of great stuff. A lot of these kiridashis are really a great way to view his work and see how that material flows through the forging. But they're also a really fun way to kind of just display some of these, like this piece right here is definitely an earlier portion of the pattern welding process, and I guarantee it's just like a little end cut. Like he said, he ends up with a lot of little end cuts, and so you can take something like that and then forge it out into a little kiridashi or a small blade. Again, this is very similar to that kiridashi, but he made it into a higanakame, which is a very simple Japanese style folding knife. It's a friction folder, actually. And I believe actually there's a history of Egyptians making copper friction folding knives. Be interesting to talk to somebody. Actually, I would love Peter Johnson is an alumni of the Artisans of Steel podcast, and I really am excited to try to get him on the podcast as well. He has such an incredible depth of knowledge and understanding of metalsmithing, bladesmithing, sword making, weapon making, especially edged weapon making throughout the ages, from flint knapping to modern times, right? He makes some of the most incredible stuff. And so he'll be a really great one to get a history lesson from, because that man knows a lot. Probably, honestly, unfortunately, too much for a single podcast. But we're gonna get some really good questions in for him, hopefully, so that we can learn a lot of history around metalsmithing, because as much as I've looked into, and I'm sure some of you have looked into bladesmithing, metalworking, and blacksmithing, especially when it comes to weapons and swords, it's such a massive history. It's a lot to learn. I guarantee even Peter doesn't know everything. So, but I really love how Jason has made good use of some of these end cuts. This is actually this Higo, or this, excuse me, this friction folder will be a cool one to ask him about, because this is kind of a little bit. I don't know if this is a newer piece, but this is a combination of early portions of the process and later portions of the welding process in a really interesting way, and it's been twisted and split down the middle, or at least portions of the material cut off. We got tons of images here. I'm just trying to pop through and just see if I have more examples of some of that combination of tighter stuff and bolder stuff. Here, let's see. Yeah. All right. Mr. J is back. I think I did a good job blabbing.
Yeah. Thanks.
we just kind of rolled through a lot of the images that I pulled up. I was just telling them, I think this kiridashi, this is one
Mm.
of the first pieces I ever saw of yours, and it completely blew my mind. I was like, what the fuck is going on there? I had never seen anything like that ever,
Yeah,
and it completely blew my mind.
yeah, um that was an exploded book match pattern
Yeah.
from my haystack residency, and they did. It was the first year that Haystack started doing an artisan residency program,
Okay.
and I think it was like a year or two after I had my first daughter.
Okay.
My wife let me go and and study there, and it really, it kind of, it touches upon something that I um you know just the kind of, I was kind of freed up during this residency to kind of just make something without being worried about um selling stuff, you know what I mean?
Right.
And I think in general, um there's a lot of makers out there that are concerned about selling stuff,
Mhm.
and and can only put this much time into an object,
Right.
and uh to make it realistic and practical to sell later on. I
Mm,
think
interesting.
um me going up to Haystack on in that certain situation, I made that piece, and I also made the mosaic hammer, um that eventually, one of
I
my
didn't.
mentors
Yeah.
and
That's not the
idols,
one.
Steve Schwarzer,
Yeah.
contacted me about, and reached out to me online, and chatted with me about it, and it was awesome to hear from the Steve Schwarzer, you know.
Yeah.
And but it was because I had this period of time in residency to be able to make just a really, and a couple objects that I didn't care about selling. I just wanted to go above and beyond, and make the coolest thing that I possibly could. And this Kiridashi was, yeah, pretty, you know a really monumental piece for me
Sure.
as well, because of just how intricate it was. I also think I started experimenting, going a little bit thinner and more
Yeah.
delicate with my patterns.
Right.
Yeah, it really turned into a really just awesome piece. Very, um, you know, uh, yeah, yeah, just a very successful pattern.
Sure. Well, and what's
But
crazy about this. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead. Go
the
ahead.
but the hammer, I don't believe those are the hammer, but I did find an example on my website. Um, let's
Mm.
see. Well, hold on a second.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
here, let me get you
Okay.
pop up here. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So those are my first Mokume
Oh,
bands, and you can
shit,
kind of
that's so
see.
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can't remember what year those were, but yeah, nickel and silver,
Right.
and um, yeah, and I think, this was my second set of Damascus rings as well. Let's see.
Oh, I'll pop you up again.
Um, that was made in Bill Farini's class.
Oh, nice.
Um, just twisted pieces. But yeah, so, just circling back on that. Um, most of that jewelry stuff can be found in the archives on my website. My
On your
website's
website.
pretty outdated, but you can see a lot of my earlier jewelry work.
Sure.
Uh, on it. But the hammer, like I said, that I made during the residency, was cool enough where Steve Zorzer reached out to me, and we developed a relationship, and um, it's been great nurturing that relationship,
For
and
sure.
and being in communication with just a pioneer of mosaic Damascus.
Right. Well, and it's 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 a crazy experience to have uh somebody like that reach out to you and say, I gotta tell you, that's pretty fucking good.
Yeah, yeah,
because
it was
because
great.
well, and this was what? This was you were at Haystack in the mid 2000s, is that right? Early 2000s?
Oh geez, let's see.
Or was that later?
Uh,
Just trying to remember the timeline you were talking about.
um, that was, I think, 2012,
Okay.
2013, maybe.
Right.
Um,
Okay, that's what I'm talking
yeah,
about.
yeah,
So when I was just starting out on my own was 2012, 2013.
yeah.
And for a second, I was like, "Nah, that seems like too long ago." But that's perfectly in line with what I was saying. And that is, yeah, I was digging around, Google searching mosaic Damascus, Damascus patterns, or whatever, and I saw that. And I was like, my brain was blown away. I
Yep,
had no idea how you did that.
it
Um,
is. It's 2013. Yeah,
that's
that was,
crazy. I mean,
yeah,
that's great, but that's so funny that yeah.
yeah,
I'm glad my brain isn't failing me yet, and I actually remembered that properly. I haven't I don't know how comfortable you feel about talking about that hammer. For a long time, I've seen that picture of that hammer. I don't have it, unfortunately, here in the thing to pop up on the screen. I'm trying to see if I can find it right now and send it to myself. But that hammer has that same pattern on all four faces around the body of the hammer, and then obviously it has hard hammerhead faces for the peen and the face. Um,
well,
and for a
well,
long
I'll
time,
be honest with you.
okay.
I'll be honest with you. It is actually just taped off on the peen in the front.
Oh, it's
And
solid.
yep. So,
Oh
but
shit.
but what's not recognizable on it, and geez, it's a little frustrating trying to talk about it without the picture. But let me see if I can pull it up real quick.
Yeah.
But that in particular hammer, that was exploded, but it was exploded on the diamond to get the mass that I
Right.
needed. So up at Haystack,
Holy
they've
smokes.
only got a little bull hammer, and my buddy Farrell Rupert,
Yeah.
a metalsmith that I went to school with in at Maine College of Art,
Yeah.
helped me hand twist maybe a 6 inch, maybe five or
Holy
six inch piece of 2.5 inch uh, thick. Um,
Holy
you
shit.
know,
That's so fucking big.
in a vise that I
Yeah.
had somebody standing on, the bottom of the vise because it wasn't bolted down while
Right.
him and I were twisting it up, and then we had to make us a little geez, what is it called? A capturing die for the bull hammer, and we made a little jig to cut the material on the diamond. And when I say on
Right.
the diamond, I mean corner to corner.
Right.
And then because I had that let's see, I'm almost there. But because I had just two and a half, it actually I stacked it back to back, so it's a four-way stack on
Right.
diamond. So here it is right here.
I got you. Yep. Here, I'll blow you up again.
Let's see. So um, can we see it right there?
Yeah. That's it.
So that's I believe that's
Pattern on all faces. Well, and that was I could tell it was a twist, but that was what was so confusing about it, is that typically in a twist, there's all kinds of you get some elongations, but all I was seeing was mosaic all the way around, and I was like,
well, that's the
"How
thing.
how the hell
You
did you
kind of
do that?"
see you can kind of see on the Instagram post like the
Right,
seam would be right on the corner, that facet corner.
right.
But yeah, so that's the core section
Oh,
on
that's
all
such
four sides of that hammer.
That's so smart
Yeah, and
that you
that's
did
just an
that.
example. That's just an example of like just really putting in the time
Yeah.
and not caring about the time so much.
Well, an
But yeah,
experiment. Yeah.
that's on my Instagram if you guys get a chance to check it out.
Yeah, definitely. And if you're listening to this later and not seeing the video, first off, you can see the video over on YouTube once this is public. But two, yeah, definitely go check out his Instagram because it is worth taking a look at that thing. My thought, and now I'm thinking about that, and that you cut those corners off like that. Did you please tell me that you welded those corners back together into a square bar?
Um, cut the corners. Um, well, well, I used a squaring die under the
Hmm.
bull hammer. So we actually fabricated, which is some angle iron, a
Yeah.
squaring die to
Uh-huh.
capture the piece because they're assembled like this, you know. So
Right.
there's triangle shapes. Those
Yeah.
are four triangle shapes to make that square.
God,
So
that's so
I,
smart.
it was just it was a good way to disguise the weld lines of where the explosion because it puts that in the corner of the hammer
Right.
and it's pretty unrecognizable as far as where everything where the pieces come together because they're
Yeah.
in the corner and because of the style of the pattern. Yeah, that was a
If
really
if any
over the top project that, like I said, because I was granted that time during the residency, I was able to go above and beyond and trying to make a really crazy object,
that
which ended up
that
paying off. You know,
yeah, no, that I still think that stands to me for me to be one of the even after now better understanding how it was put together, or even actually, especially now better understanding how it was put together. That was probably one of the most has been one of the most complicated pieces for me to try to like I could see their twists. I understood that they were twists, but I
uh,
didn't understand how the twist pattern was being revealed on all four faces. And that's what
absolutely.
really fucked me up for a
Yep.
long time. And now I get it. And because what I was had been thinking is like, oh, interesting. So he made twist pattern, and then you did your thing where you explode it, you split it in half, but then what I thought is that you basically welded them as a skin on the outside of a core of like 1084 or 1085 or something like that, like a body. You weld it
Yeah.
on the outside of a body and still kind of have them come together where the weld seams are in the corners. But that was the only thing that I could think, like, how, but I didn't even cross my mind
Uh,
that you could do that
of
four-way like that and
of a diagonal
yeah,
explosion. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I haven't
Oh
done
my
it
god.
since. I haven't done it since. It was such a pain in the ass. You know what I mean? Like
Whoa,
making that
fuck,
jig
I
for
can't
the
even yeah,
saw. Like,
yeah,
but
and then, yeah, having the material afterwards, enough material yeah, it does
yeah,
sound like a fucking nightmare, but
yeah.
that is a a brilliant I think that's probably one of the most interesting, solutions I've seen for making a very cool use of twist patterns.
Oh yeah.
Um, I love that I love that you had that opportunity in resident to have that residency, and I've honestly, like, especially in the last few years, I'm like, I enjoy making my knives. The knives are fun, but I really, really love making the Damascus, and I have so many concepts and ideas that I don't have time to explore because I'm caught up with also trying to make a living at the same time. I'm like,
Mm.
God, I feel if only I had a patron of some sort where or I was part of some sort of um like a co-op or something where my job was just to play and making mosaics and making crazy patterns and then kind of like sharing that back to the world in a way in some sort of meaningful way to help advance other makers knowledge and technique and skill
Mm.
and that just doesn't unfortunately really exist unless you score it seems like unless you score a residency situation where basically you're kind of being compensated for doing that kind of creative exploration, right? And that's
Yep.
what created that opportunity for you to develop that approach for that hammer. God damn, that's so fucking cool.
Absolutely.
That's gonna fuck me up for a little while, which is great. I love it.
Yeah, that's a fun
um
story.
yeah, so cool. um So I'm just trying to think where we want to go next. So you you've done tons of uh exploring through various disciplines of art and creativity, uh not only making knives, but axes as well. I want to pop up some of these axes. um uh, for us, me and Jason, it's kind of hard to see these axes, but hopefully people seeing the video, they'll be
Mhm.
able to see the details a little bit better. And they're cuts of his mosaic bars, forged out, and maybe some more material added, to create the bits where the edges, will do the cutting and coming into contact. Actually, we got a close up of this one.
Mhm.
um, and then you also use mosaic as part of your wedges in the top of the hammer, which I think is super fucking cool. Um,
Yeah, that
we got
double
an
bit is a
example over
solo.
here.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
the double bit is a solo project. The one that you showed before, the pulled axe, is is a
Right here.
collaboration between me and Steve. Jeez, sorry, I feel bad forgetting his name. Um, let me let me look that up. But
No,
that
you're
is a
good.
collaboration piece. Yeah, hold on one
Yeah.
second. Um, I'm just drawing a blank here for a second. Um, but yeah, the that in particular double bitted axe is my mosaic slabbed onto 1045
Okay.
inside and then pushed through.
Oh
Um,
wow, nice.
yeah, sorry.
You're good.
I'm a little overwhelmed here. Steve Ash, sorry about that.
Steve Ash.
Um, Steve Ash, yep, blacksmith out in New Hampshire, excellent maker, excellent axe maker. But yeah, we did a few projects together. Him using some of my steel, in particular,
Right.
that piece of steel right there in
Yeah.
that collaboration with him, um, is one of my techniques where I am doing a twist, and I believe that most of those lines were all the same thickness in lines,
Okay.
but I think that in particular technique, I'm doing a big twist, and then I'm upsetting the twist from top and bottom and smushing
Right.
it back down, and then changing the axis of it and drawing it out, and then doing another twist, and then smushing that down top to
Oh,
bottom,
holy
and
shit.
then so
Jesus.
so in the end, um, it's definitely awesome for more of a forge to shape stock removal piece,
Sure.
and in particular on this piece where Steve put a bit in and forged out real thin, there's
Hmm.
a lot of variance in line thicknesses, but especially where he cut in on the back pulled areas, it's just
Right.
really, really cool action going on there.
Yeah.
Of course, this is a folded and a bitted axe design where you're actually folding and forge welding and then forge welding
Okay.
and bitting, as
Right. Right.
opposed
Right.
to the double bitted axe with the mosaic,
Yeah.
where that is just punched through. Yeah,
Okay.
punched through, and there's a solid block of material with my pattern on both sides.
Right. I got you.
But that one technique in particular was just really super successful on that forged out and folded piece by Steve Ash.
Killer.
Um, yeah.
I'm gonna pull up this friction folder. This is another good example of some of those bolder lines mixed with fine lines you were talking about earlier. And there's another twist piece.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and these blacksmith folders were all done under the studying with Nick Rossi,
okay.
and he, um, I just can't say enough good things about him. He is just probably one of the most well-rounded um, uh, makers that I know. Just super experienced, super educated in all sorts of materials,
Sure.
and just really a super fun guy to work with. I've been super fortunate to collaborate and continue to collaborate with Nick. He's you've met him. He's just really a really great human being and maker.
Yeah. Yeah. And you
But
guys work together in a shop, You shared a shop together, correct?
Yes, we
Oh
shared a
wow,
shop, and Nick ended up purchasing a building and moving out there, and but we still try to get together at least, once a week, and
oh
and
wow,
and we've got some new projects coming up shortly
very cool,
here, um, that I'm excited to share on social media shortly here.
very cool. Um, yeah, and I mean that it sounds like you've always worked in kind of a communal setting, and that it's always kind of benefited you in a positive way, which is fortunate. Do you have any advice for people when it comes to working in a more communal or shared shop kind of situation? Because sometimes
Um,
it can be challenging, for sure. I'm
yeah, I
sure you
mean,
guys still had your challenges.
yeah,
Uh,
I mean, working alongside Nick, he's just such an going person.
yeah.
I definitely had some other makers in the studio that I did not vibe with
Hmm.
on nearly the same level, and you know, it's it, it's weird. I love I love collaborating with people, and you know and I've been super fortunate to collab with, just like I said, my preteen idols, Rick Dunkerley,
Hmm.
Van Barnett,
Oh
you
yeah.
know,
I actually
uh,
got a picture of the
Jim,
piece with Van.
Jim Kroll. He has not. Jim hasn't shown the most recent thing yet, but I'm real psyched about this most recent piece that he just finished up. But where was I going with it? I'm sorry. But the collaboration, just putting 100% of your effort into something, and then handing it off or assisting someone else to put their
Sure.
100% in, and just creating this object of a fusion of personalities. I just
Right.
think it is just awesome. And like a lot of people are just like a little, you know I don't know, I've heard of people, there's, it's awesome. And I do like making objects myself. Now that I'm getting a little older, my eyesight's kind of getting a little fuzzier,
Okay.
um, and I've been challenged on some of my, sanding and file work and stuff like
Sure.
that. More recently this year, I started wearing cheater safety glasses, and it was pretty humbling. And but I the fussiness, I love making pattern, and that's, you were talking about just kind of being in a situation where you're able just to make pattern, and I've been fortunate to kind of put myself in that position
Right.
with Cabot guns,
Right.
where I'm making uh, um, steel patterns for them and handing off chunks for
Right.
them to do some machining too, and it just really has, it's awesome, and they're just super supportive, um, people to work with, and they're all about quality, and they're making 1911s, and we touched on this a little bit before the
Sure.
interview. I haven't gone really into sharing a lot of the stuff, because of a couple of posts, and it turning into a political debate about Second Amendment rights, and
Sure.
and there, I believe there at one point, there, right around the same time I posted, there was some kind of, shooting
Mm.
with an assault rifle, and I just caught a lot of slack, and it was stressful, and it pushed me a little bit
Sure.
away from social media.
Right.
I just, I'm there for fun, and I want to keep it light and just be inspired, and not not talk politics and stuff. It
Right.
was just kind of weird. So I haven't posted a lot of my the gun stuff. There, it's mostly a company that makes all custom 1911
Yeah.
guns, and they've been super supportive. And I have some big projects coming up with them this year,
That's exciting.
including a documentary that they want to do, um, with me, that I'm super
Very cool.
psyched on. Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do have a few of the images of the pistol grips. You can see these, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And these are
Those grips, I think I made with Steve Schwarzer and Rick
oh, nice.
Furr,
Oh,
and
crazy. Cool.
I believe if you research and you look into um, the Cabot guns, the piece that's from is insanely engraved, and I thought it would
Oh,
be really weird with my piece next to this crazy engraving, but it's just a really
they
mind-blowing
complement each other
thing.
nicely.
Yeah, yeah, and I thought it would be just be weird, but it is pretty awesome, and I love the story behind it, the history
Sh-
behind that
For
particular
sure.
piece.
This is
Yeah,
another one. It looks like it's paired with damascus steel slide.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think I did a series of 10 guns with them,
Okay.
where it was just my grips and the damascus steel slide. A little weird explaining that to people, just being like, "Yeah, it's my grips and the damascus steel," but it was
Hmm.
kind of my first uh, project with them.
I got
Is
you.
a little foot in the door um,
And then
series.
this
Yep,
this last one we got, it's both the slide and the grip, and this pattern is fucking sick. It looks
yep,
so good on there. I
yeah.
love that.
That's the Diablo Damascus. That made Maxim magazine.
Oh no
Um,
shit.
yeah,
That's rad.
and and it just yeah, I was pretty pumped with it. Again, that's an exploded pattern.
Right.
It's book matched back to back.
Yeah.
Um, and it came out excellent. Yeah, those guys are just really awesome to work with.
I really love how you use the book matching, the back-to-back book matching to bring everything together, and that the pattern still on the sides, like it, even though typically like a lot of people would see that kind of stretch in the pattern to kind of be boring or not as interesting as kind of like the mosaic core, the
Mhm.
way it works in this form is really nice. It really it fits that form really well, I think. And
Yeah, I mean,
it's really really cool.
that came out a couple years ago,
Okay.
or yeah, a couple years back, and and that whole process. I mean, they're giving me dimensions to send in, and
Hmm.
then they're machining off. Like
Tons of material.
over yeah, so much material
Yeah.
that trying to strategically place that pattern where it's going to be interesting for them to machine into. There was just tons of R&D
Right.
for a year and a half, and then upscaling my equipment to try to make these bigger sections. Yeah, I'm currently trying to work on some full frame material for them,
Right.
where they need like 12-inch by 5.5 by roughly inch and an eighth, inch and a quarter.
Hmm.
Um, and just trying to figure out how to place that material um, to be properly machined and expose the pattern
Sure.
properly is has been a lot of R&D.
Right.
But yeah, um, these new patterns I'm coming up with, including that twist, the orientation and changing the direction,
Yeah.
that's going to be all applied to projects this year with them. So I'm
Very
pretty
cool.
excited for people to see it.
Yeah. Well, and what I really appreciate and respect about your work is that you do a lot more with twists than I do. I basically I think I twisted material like twice, and
Mhm.
they're both for it was both were for projects that I didn't even finish.
Yeah.
One of them still in billet form actually. I was gonna forge a little what was I gonna forge out of that? I can't even remember what it's called. Anyways, an old a Peugeot,
Mhm.
this old kind of like Roman uh horseback or like the dagger that they would
Yeah.
carry.
A
And
short dagger. Yeah. Short wide
yeah,
dagger.
short
Yeah.
wide dagger.
Yeah. Those pieces.
And but it's I love it because your approach with twists, because one, the patterns you were making throughout the core of that material is not only so unique, but I feel like you make very good use of those patterns. My concern always has been like spending all this time making this mosaic pattern and then turning around and like either cutting away like 60% of the pattern just to get down to the core of what's interesting in the material. Your applications actually play and benefit, like especially with like the pistol grips, splitting it right down the middle, and then what would normally be kind of like the straight lines around the outside or whatever of a twist, they're
Mm.
they're against the body of the grip, and you don't really see them. All
Yeah.
right. And yeah, I think you really make a really good use, and honestly, a compelling argument for the value of twists. Because honestly, I struggled for a long time. I was like, twists are boring,
Yeah.
and on and sometimes they're interesting. If people hit like the right line density or the right combination, stuff like that. For the most part, I really struggle with them because of the material waste or the material loss. But your twist work, I would say for sure, is probably the most compelling I know of right now, in our craft, in our industry.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Hell
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, it's, I was doing it by hand for a while with Nick Rossi most
Right.
of the time, on the other side, dancing
Yeah.
with me around the vise. But yeah, I was fortunate to score a twisting machine from Rick Furr, and
Nice.
a local blacksmith, Bob Menard, helped me
Oh yeah.
modify my twist machine
Sure.
and turned it into a simple tooling twist machine that I can do roughly, you know, 2 1/4
Wow.
ish stock pretty easily.
Yeah.
Um, but that makes a huge difference, having a twisting machine that you can do larger stock. But it is really about getting into that. And like I said, I dealt with the same kind of issue, or trying to problem solve the same thing where you're just removing so much material to get to that. But yeah, explosion is the key. Exploding it or cutting slabs out of it
Hmm.
is how I get into my pattern. And I think when I was exploring the twist thing, I just was trying to avoid, that Turkish four-way star, which makes
Sure.
it, which makes it easy to decipher as a twist, I guess is what
Uh-huh.
I'm trying to say.
Right.
You know what I mean? So a good way to avoid that is to not put center lines down your twist pattern.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that made me offset a lot of stuff, which also is a good example of the offset twist in that the Diablo
Right.
pistol with Cabot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Because those would be telltale. And what's unusual about the Diablo is like it's just one solid thing through the middle. And
Yeah.
you're not really used to seeing that. You're used to seeing that, yeah, like you said, that Turkish twist star. And so you kind of, without that, it doesn't look, it's difficult to right off the bat just be like, oh, that's a twist.
Yeah.
Um,
Exactly.
yeah, well done, sir.
Thank
I
you.
wanted to, oh, geez. I just screwed up my image. I want to kind of roll through some of these images. Like you were saying, you've done a lot of cool collaborations. I believe this is one with Nick Anger,
Yeah.
um, or Mr. Auger.
Yeah.
And then I'm trying to
Yeah.
see. Oh,
Nick is
go
just
ahead.
and he, I really got to give him credit. He is the one that helped turn and make the connection between me and Cabot. So I mean,
Oh, very
he's
cool.
just been such a supportive friend, and maker. He's just, uh, you know, uh, I got a lot of respect for him. He's really done a great job being, almost, pretty close to all like self-taught,
Right.
and just churning out the material,
Yeah.
um, or churning out a finished product. I mean,
Right.
um, it's super inspirational to watch him and work next to him, and he really helped out with my social media,
Sure.
in the beginning of my career. You know, he's obviously doing very well with his
Yeah.
social media stuff,
For
and
sure.
um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I got to give him props and credit. He's been such a great friend and supportive maker.
Yeah. And
I love
he does.
working with him. Great
Yeah,
guy.
he does a great job with your material. So actually, I think it was. I can't remember if it was his work or your work that came first, which was the chicken and which was the egg. Um, but yeah, that's kind of. I feel like it might have been seeing Nick's stuff early on,
Mhm.
potentially too, that might have directed me towards you. And I was like, well, who's that guy? And then I pulled up some of your stuff, and I was like, holy shit.
Yeah,
uh,
yeah,
and then we got some more of these blacksmith knives that you did. I love. washers, the coined or textured washers on the outside of this friction folder. It's really
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah, that was a
Um,
fun.
and then you also and all the various kiridashis. We started with this one, which is also obviously very, very fucking cool.
Mm.
But you use the kiridashis, and I think like you were saying before, you often end up because you work with it like you like to work with a specific kind of format of like 2 inch by 6 inch, and you end up with material at the end. And I think this is a fun way. I would assume that these are basically maybe a 1/4 inch or 3/8 inch coupons cut off the end of a 2x2 bar that
Hmm.
you forge into these kiridashis. But I love that you play with this kind of dagger form with your kiridashis because it's not conventional, but it's also still functional. And
Mm.
the way the symmetrical or sorry the symmetry of how the pattern flows through them is very cool. And then I think again just a very fun way to kind of show the pattern in a way that it might not typically be seen, especially if you're doing a lot of twisting or multiplying of the four ways and stuff like that, or tiling with it, right?
Yeah, I mean, um, you know, I um, as far as making mosaic, excuse me, you are tasked with having to cut off sections at the end that are distorted in just
Right,
a certain way, which will probably make when you put them back together as a mosaic or a four-way stack, they've got a little too much distortion in them. So
right,
conveniently, um, conveniently, I developed a little bit of a production line out of these end cuts,
right.
um, which makes it kind of fun to excuse me, forge to shape
Yeah,
and see how the pattern distorts through that forging.
sure, to
That was
encourage that flow, yeah, and
yeah,
the
exactly.
distortion, right,
That was a really fun, great example of it, just where I fullered in a little finger groove there and it kind of pushed that little material out of the way. But yeah,
right.
it's a great production and I do enjoy making them. Um, as far as the Kiridashi, this is just um, this is just a chisel grind utility knife.
Right.
And, I think I was always kind of influenced. Hold on one second. Where I go? Let me just make sure my dogs are. Hold
Okay.
on one second.
Yeah, you're good. Yeah, these kiridashis are so cool. I love them. And actually, I think I want to start doing this. I think this it's such a great use and a simple way to do something that is fun, basically. With your Damascus. I typically, like I was saying before, I get caught up with the whole um oh, let's see if we can switch that around. Pull it out here. Okay. I get caught up with the whole I gotta make knives to make money, and sometimes that takes some of the fun out of it. But if you can take an end cut of a bar that looks like this, or looks like this, or looks like whatever, some of these examples, these mosaic patterns, and then forge them into something small, simple, fun, it helps kind of like inject a little bit of the creativity and the freedom um, that comes with something simple and small like that doesn't need to fit any specific dimensions or shape, yeah, dimension, shapes, certain length, all the different things that make for me typically a chef's knife. And so I love that these little kiridashi are just like a nice little way to step out from kind of working in kind of constraint and having being able to play a little bit. I was just saying that I think I want to start kind of doing something along those lines where I take some of the end cuts and just play with them and
That,
to inject a little bit of fun into what is typically a bit of drudgery to go through the whole process of the knife making process, to be able to also, especially as it's cold here, like to have to just have some material. I have material right now I could do this with, and cut it off and just start the day off, get the blood flowing, warm up, forge out a little kiridashi to get rolling and starting the day. Because also one of the things I struggle with, especially when it's cold, if I'm not feeling super motivated or excited to work, like I really struggle to get that push to go. But if I'm doing something that's fun for me, that helps get that wheel spinning so I can carry that momentum on into other stuff that I need to actually get done.
It's a super fun, quick project that you can kind of, you have a flat back, you just grind that flat on the grinder, and then,
Yeah.
you forge that bevel in. But what I was saying before was, the Kiridashi being a chisel grind, you have to kind of determine whether or not it's a righty or lefty with that. So
Oh,
what
right,
I
right.
started doing was with those spear point ones is making them righty and lefties. And
Right.
they
Oh, that's
actually,
smart.
yeah, they actually kind of conveniently, especially on those, they
Yeah.
started working really nice with my aquatic kind of inspired forms. Like these
Right.
pieces in particular, um, kind of inspired by fish bones or cross sections of vertebrae.
Right. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so some of my more detailed four-ways, that
Right.
they look like slices of a bone section or something from some kind of organic
And
marine life or something.
for sure. I was
So
gonna
yeah,
pop this one up with Van. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, but yes, absolutely. I think you should. I think you should grab, a tile. In fact, maybe I'm gonna send you a couple tiles, and I think you should just kind of crank out some kiridashis because
Play
they
with
are
them.
super. They're fun warm ups,
Right.
and kind of cool production.
Van
Yeah,
Barnett, you mentioned him earlier. I've been following his work only for a few years now. Um, but his take on stuff is so unique and so different, and I love the way he makes use of geometric shapes and forms and kind of like these kind of like sometimes almost kind of like a steampunk, but more of like a clockwork mechanism kind of aesthetic to his work is very
mm,
cool. And how he got these colors on this blade, I don't understand really. It
yeah.
looks
He's nuts. He is nuts.
he's doing some magical shit there.
Yeah, I
And
love those pieces, and then um, yeah, and that kind of forced me to work. I think that was, can't remember if it was like L6 and W2,
oh
and I
wow.
really, I think that was the formula.
Okay.
Um, but it definitely moved different, and
Yeah.
there's some different distortion going on there too.
Right.
So that was really fun, and
What a crazy
geez,
combination.
no, L6 and W. I'm not quite sure. Don't quote me on that. I got to check
Okay.
in with those guys, but it was a different formula than I was used to using, which is mostly, you know, 1084 and 15 and 20.
Sure.
Pretty,
I've definitely heard of people doing L6 and O1. Um, but I've never heard of
it,
the
L6, W2. Yeah. Let,
something
let me double check
unusual.
on that. I can't remember. It's been a few years.
No worries. You don't have to fact check yourself. I really want this razor, this straight razor you made. Or is this another collaboration piece?
Nope, nope. That's sole authorship.
Yeah,
I think I made
so
that
good.
um under the studying under Howard Clark. Actually, I think that was a Howard Clark class.
Oh, all right.
I started that up in, yeah, little mammoth tooth
I can see that. Just
spacer,
right.
and yeah, mosaic blade. Yeah, Howard is just awesome.
I've wanted to do straight razors for a long time, and it just just honestly for my own creative exploration. I'm not going to get into the straight razor game and then give up on making chef's knife.
Yeah,
I there's a lot of the forms you've explored. That's what I want to do. Make hammers, make axes, the folders, the straight razors, like all these different things. Like you've taken classes with Peter Johnson. You've made swords, like exploring all these different things, just for again like my own creative, and I'm sure for you too, my own creative exploration. What are some of the techniques that transfer possibly or could inform or inspire some different approaches either to the pattern making or how I make my chef's knives? um
yeah,
and I've just never really ever been in a place to do that, unfortunately. But
yeah,
someday,
yeah.
hopefully, I keep praying and trying to puzzle out and figure out how to make it happen, because that's definitely more of the direction I want to start going with the work I'm
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah, you got to make time for classes. You got to budget in at least, like, a class or two a year,
Yeah,
something that you can apply your techniques to.
right.
Yes, yeah, studying under Peter Johnson
Oh, sorry.
has just been awesome as well. Yeah, just recently getting back from a class from Zach Jonas's, where he hosts Peter, and yeah, that's a whole different education than studying with most of the ABS masters that I've studied with.
For sure.
He's been able to study edged weapons and objects, internationally, and yeah, his design and sense of design and and theory about making is incredible, and super fortunate to have studied under him through a few different classes.
Yeah.
Stay tuned for a finished product sword. Uh,
Sweet.
yeah.
Yeah, I was mentioning that he is also an alum of the Artisans of Steel calendar, and so I'm excited to have him come on and talk a bit more kind of from a historical aspect about metalsmithing, weapon making, how that it's influenced even simple knives or complex knives. I think part of that, it came up because I was talking about the friction folders and how I believe actually, while a lot of people know these as higunakamis, the friction folder goes back to, I believe, ancient Egypt. They made copper friction folders,
Oh yeah.
and who knows before that. And it's so crazy, like the history that is behind a lot of these different kind of works. This
Oh yeah.
is an earlier folder you made.
Nope.
Um,
That's actually
oh,
that is,
is it
that's a Rick
collaborative?
Dunker. That's
Ah,
actually
I
a
got you.
That's a Rick Dunkerley folder,
Hmm.
and I'm super proud to say that.
Yeah,
This is, I think what he told me, this is the first time he's used anybody else's steel on a folder.
nice.
And I'm so psyched that you brought it up, because Rick has just been, the most supportive mentor of mine. I have so many Rick Dunkerley sayings going around in my head constantly when I'm making
Dunkerleisms.
stuff. Yeah,
Sure.
yeah, it's crazy. He's just such a um, uh, such a crazy force to be around, and
Right.
listening to his advice as just a human being and a maker is just like really inspirational and mind-blowing. I really he's a excellent human being. And I this in particular piece I own, and
Oh,
it's in my,
nice.
and it's
Oh,
just,
crazy.
I love showing it off. And that's another thing I'm kind of big on too. I love, I don't know, next time you're here, I really want to show you, but I have spent a fair amount of money and time uh, to collecting objects made by all my mentors and people that I look up to.
For sure.
So and a lot of people are like, why do you collect a knife when you could just make it yourself? And it's like, this is this person's energy, and
Right.
this design right here, has been, well thought out, and there's, and to be able to hold it and feel the balance and the weight and
Right.
just the pure energy of the maker. Um, I'm a big collector of objects, and despite the fact that I really can't afford it, I do have a decent collection of just awesome knives that my friends and mentors have made. And I think even, I plan on trying to get my JS pretty soon here,
Oh,
and
great.
I'm actually going to be basing my JS knives off of these other blades that my mentors have made in
Oh, very
proportion.
cool.
Uh,
Right.
so a little shout out to them.
Hell yeah. This folder, is this yours or is this another
That
Rick
that
Dunkerley?
that is my folder, but it
Yeah.
is a Rick Dunkerley pattern. So Rick, in his classes, he hands out a template So
Okay.
the profile is a Rick Dunkerley profile with my
That is a
pattern
cool
weld.
profile.
And yeah. Um, this was made. This is actually the object that was made, or one of my folders that was made when I was out in Idaho with Bill and
I
Rick,
got you.
and they took time out of the class to show me how to do that mother of pearl inlay
Wow.
on it. Yeah, and this is a Jake Ripley photograph. Jake is a new video and photo guy that I've brought into my studio, and he's
Sure.
been doing pretty excellent work. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. So that piece is definitely kind of my newest finished piece. Definitely one of my favorite pieces, and it's gone into a very supporting collector's collection. So I'm real psyched about it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess one last question I got for you before we get into a few questions from the audience,
Mhm.
is you're doing you do a lot of great collaborations with very interesting people who do very cool and interesting things with your work. You're also doing a lot of very interesting stuff with your own material, and constantly pushing the envelope of ways to apply mosaic damascus in finished products. When I was going through your Facebook photos of work you've done, and which I'm sure people can see in your gallery on your website, there are also, like you mentioned earlier, there are vessels like bowls and stuff using some of your glass work. There are what planes, like a Japanese wood plane with a bit a cutting chisel or blade that you made using some of your mosaic. Um,
Mhm.
what are I know you've already mentioned you have a few projects coming down the line that you're really excited about, sharing and talking about soon. Is there anything that uh, you're willing to share, or kind of some concepts and ideas coming down the road that you are cool talking about, with where you want things to now go? You're doing the things with Cabot too, which are really cool. And yeah, so what are maybe some things that you don't mind sharing that are coming down the pipeline that are keeping kind of like your creativity spinning and going, and
Uh-huh.
continue to inspire you and to look forward to, because I think that's
Yeah.
really important for creatives for sure.
Yeah, geez. I mean, yeah, that block plane was a project I did with my buddy Jim White, Crown Plane at Crown Plane on Instagram. Um, and I think the vessel that you were talking about was an urn, a steel
Mm,
urn, for my mother-in-law when she passed.
okay.
Um, but as far as new projects coming down the line, I'm gearing up for the full frame build out with Cabot guns, and then Nick and I are also doing some forged Bali songs coming up pretty soon
Oh, sick.
here, and we also have a pretty crazy mosaic um, Japanese sword inspired piece.
Oh, wow.
That is coming down the line pretty soon here. Um, so yeah, I'll be doing a couple like just quick sneak peeks of probably the pattern reveals, a couple of these
I
projects,
got you.
but you could see you'll probably see the Bali songs in the next couple of weeks.
Okay.
And I don't know if you've seen, I don't know if you pulled up that picture of the full mosaic Bali song that we did,
Oh,
but
you mean this one?
I really, yeah, that, yeah.
That thing's so
Uh,
cool.
yeah, so yeah, like I said, Nick is just really above and beyond, and figuring out, yeah, he's kind of the mastermind behind a lot of those um uh Hugo Nakami's
Okay.
detent friction folders, and
Right.
then yeah, he is the mastermind behind this um yeah, that Bali song. It's crazy.
Very cool. Yeah, and I love that the lock at the end is a hammer.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah,
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 like a
nice
Czech
little.
style.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well,
Yeah.
cool. I appreciate. I actually I have one of my own personal questions for. I mean, I've obviously been asking you tons of questions already,
Mm,
but when it
yeah.
comes to some of these cabot projects, how does that work with them? That because you're obviously sending the steel to them, but they're doing the machining work. Do you have you walked through the process of finishing them out to get some of like especially that newest one that has the crazy contrast? Um,
Mm.
with how to finish that out so they're getting the best results? Or are they just figuring out their own thing or
I mean, I've offered advice, and those guys go so deep with their etch, which is just awesome.
yeah,
They're messing around with muriatics for their stainless, I guess, right?
sure.
Is that what
Yeah,
you normally do on stainless?
typically, yeah.
Um, and then you know, um, th- they do a little bit of a different style than me. Um, I don't know how you do it, Mareko, but
Sure.
you know, I usually mix up a fresh batch, and I don't leave it in for a super long time. I'm constantly cleaning it,
Okay.
and I'm also warming and cleaning. I offer this advice to them that they've got it pretty dialed in. I mean,
Sure.
there was a learning curve. I think they might have admitted to messing up a set of grips or something like that in the beginning. But
We need you to
but
make some
I
more. We fucked these ones up.
yeah, I've offered advice, and they've taken it, and they do a pretty good job. It's weird. It's a mystery to me. Like I have not held one of these objects in my hands,
Mm,
which is kind of weird. But you know, it is a mystery to me how much etching, and then because they go so deep with it.
right.
They must be doing some machining afterwards for the
Mm,
interior parts that are connecting. So it's a mystery to me,
sure.
but I have offered them some ideas about, or yeah, I've offered them some suggestions on how I go about it myself. Yeah.
Right. Um, and then I guess the other thought I have is like in regards to the because obviously the Damascus is on the grips, and I assume that you're making out the same kind of steel combination you typically use for your mosaics. What they might be doing to kind of protect against corrosion of any kind. Are they like doing a clear Cerakote or something on it, or
I don't think,
some secret magic
yeah,
that they're not
I
sharing with the world?
yeah, geez, it's hard to say. I have not asked them about how they do protect it. I mean, it's going on. Yeah, I mean, it's on the grips, so there's a lot of touching and feeling going on, I guess,
For
on the
sure.
steel. But I have not asked them about how they coat it.
Right.
Um,
No worries. I always see stuff like that. I'm like, fuck, that looks great. But then my next thought is that that is a part of a thing that gets touched a lot.
oh yeah, yeah. No, I hear you. I hear you.
Okay, our first question here before we wrap up, we got a few questions from the audience. If you want to be part of the conversation, part of these interviews, to be able to ask some of these questions, jump into my Patreon. You can join at the illuminated individual level, and you can be part of the conversations as they're happening live, which is where this question's coming from, as well as being able to ask these questions, get these insights that might be able to help you through your process, as well as just learning in general and trying to gain some wisdom and insight. So this first one is from Tortuga Blade Works, which we said earlier is our friend Brian Hennekamp. And he says, I'm curious about the dynamics of working in different mediums, glass versus metal, and how that impacts your design and techniques, whether in good ways or challenging ways. And we obviously have touched on your glass experience, or talked about your glass experience and how that might inspire or influence some of the metal. But so what are maybe some of the impacts, design wise, that maybe you've tried something that obviously works in glass and then you tried it in steel and I was like, nope, that doesn't work, or vice versa.
Mm. Geez, I mean, the dynamics of working in different mediums, clusters of metal. Um, I mean, the difference being is glass is a lot more kind of immediate of a
Okay.
process. You could,
Oh yeah, sure.
it takes me, for a cabochon, I can make a glass cabochon which is just the rounded dome shape um, object, in a half hour and stick it in the kiln. Usually I put two of these cabochons together for a marble, and I can have a marble in an hour.
Oh wow.
It's more immediate process uh, than metal. Um, with my mosaic techniques, I mean, it's a little frustrating because it's such a slow process of just stacking. And we discussed this before about, my four ways and stuff like that, how I'm doing, I'm stacking two pieces together as opposed to four.
Yeah,
So, um, so the process just is is a little more extensive in working with metal, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
sure.
I don't know if that answers the question, but it's just more of a slower process for me. Um,
Right.
but most of the techniques, like I said before, um, most of my twisting techniques and stuff like that, um, the way that I'm able to visualize what's going on in there comes from working in glass. Being able to see
Gotcha.
through a transparent and an opaque pattern,
Right.
and kind of have a rough idea what's on the inside.
Interesting. Yeah,
I don't know if
that's
that answers your question.
no, I think
Um,
that's perfect. I think that's really cool how the glass does help your design process, or especially when it comes to visualizing, because until you make it and twist it and cut it in half, it can be extremely challenging to see what, or to visualize what that might look like.
yeah,
And so from that, your glass working experience, it has helped you to be able to visualize, because you can see what's going on at the end of the bar, visualize how that is affected through the twisting process and what the end results will end up looking. And that probably honestly also informs, how dense of a twist do you go for? Do you go for something super tight? Do you go for a little lazier? It really comes down to how you want it to present in the final piece. And the only way you can do that is either from doing it a lot and
mhm,
making mistakes, or seeing it a lot,
and
or having that background with the glass really helps, it seems like, to be able to see that.
absolutely. And I'll um, you know, in addition to what we were talking about with the etching process and glass, I should be putting out some videos of, like, I'll probably be assembling some wine glasses
Oh,
for
cool.
Christmas, and some marbles. So stay tuned for some video stuff. And then in addition to that, I think I was going to do just a quick little demo on etching in a video as well, coming up pretty soon here.
Nice. Right, because you got Jake in the shop now that you're
Yes.
working with, who is a talented photographer, videographer.
Yep.
That's very cool to that'll be a great insight, honestly, for a lot of people, to just see your process. Like we said before, yeah, there are just as many different processes as there are people, basically. And
Mm,
so while maybe I learned from somebody, I put my twist on it, or I find this way that works for me, particularly because of whatever. And
mhm.
I've made my own change, or just because that information is going in my ear and then coming out of my hands, that just that filter itself changes the way things are done, even in the most minute way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, this next one is from Mike Poor. He says, I can see where Murano glass can influence pattern building. Have you explored this much? Uh, or he also says something about Penrose tiling, which I'm not familiar. I don't know what that means.
Yeah, me neither. Yeah, let's see.
Interesting.
Rose tiling.
But we kind of touched on it before too, about how it's like sometimes you're puzzling some of those pieces together in your mosaics, where you're mixing tighter lines with more broad lines, and making use of some of that, basically cane, if you want to call it cane, or you call it mosaic bar or Damascus bars or whatever, and you're putting them back together to create interesting line orientation and movement, and organization.
Yeah, let's see, I can see. So Penrose tiling is an example of aperiodic tiling. Here is a tiling covering plane, not overlapping polygons. So Yeah, I mean, that is my thing. Stacking and restacking using composite mosaics, and just kind of going, um, you know, modular with them, and doing different sections, um, of more intricate pattern, assembled with bolder lines. And I really think, yeah, that's kind of my gig. It's just trying to get the illusion of depth through line thickness,
For
and
sure.
to achieve that, I'm taking sections of smaller billets, and placing them in with larger lines. If that
Nice.
answers the question.
Yeah, I think so. For sure. Okay, Mike actually has another question here in the chat. He says, what steps do you take slash tooling that you use to diminish distortion in your patterns? Are you drawing your bars out with squaring dies? What are you doing? And what he means is, we were seeing in some of your example, or some of the examples here on the video, is you get a lot of very, very regimented, clean, sharp, straight lines, where obviously forging creates all kinds of distortion and movement, whether intentional or unintentional. And so, and maybe this isn't something you want to talk about. Maybe it is. I don't know. Your call.
Oh, no,
Um,
no. I work with my Yin Yang 165,
yeah,
and with my Uncle Al's press right next to it. I get a little 50-pound tire hammer off to the side,
right.
for smaller little forging of knives. But I mostly work on that 165. It is an excellent machine. It's the heavy series. It's got a 14-inch stroke. It is awesome. Um, One thing that I really uh, one thing that helps me out is when I'm making these precise things, or these precise patterns, is I like to treat myself and think about simplifying all my movements. And
Okay.
that means when I'm under my power hammer, I am directly in the center of my dies. If there is a
Mm,
saddle there in the die, it's going to grip and hold my piece right in the center. I reference 90-degree angles and try to limit all my motions to just a couple simplified motions. Like when you're on a
okay.
grinder, just like when you're on a grinder grinding your knives, I tend to just use my body to move back and forth. I try to simplify my all the different motions in my body. I try to
Right.
just use, you know, just my arms for pulling it out, in and out,
Sure.
underneath the hammer. And then what I usually do is after I get done drawing something out, I go over and I use the hydraulic press to straighten it out.
Sure.
Um, I, I, I've been able to kind of avoid rhombuses, and
Great.
I guess if I run into one, yes, I use a squaring die to kind of fix that. Um, I'll never post a tile that's rhombused. I can't do that. I'm real, like, yeah. So I try to just make everything as precise as possible. That's really, you have to, when you're doing mosaics. You have to
Sure.
get it just really on top of it. But I got to tell you, that kind of obsessiveness, that when I was doing my four ways, all the four-way, um, kind of starfish patterns or sliced vertebrae patterns, that where the
Hmm.
patterns are centralized, that started driving me super nuts after a while, just from trying to remove that material without removing too much for when it goes back together.
Right.
If it's just a little bit offset, that 15 and 20 pattern is just a little bit offset, it really is a huge distraction to your eye. So that's
Right.
that's kind of what pushed me into my most recent kind of urban circuits.
Sure.
Um, and again, that's one that is an older pattern, and you
Right.
can
This
see
example
how they're
is
just a little bit off.
it's
Like
just a
that,
slight misalignment.
that
Right.
that throws me off a little bit.
Right.
This pattern was also, yeah, the a W pattern was used to stack on that one.
Yeah.
So it makes it look just a little bit different than my other ones.
For sure.
But
This
yes,
one,
that one right there, yeah.
very, very skillfully controlled
Yeah.
for symmetry. It actually, that's pretty fucking exemplar. right there, honestly. I'm looking
Yeah,
at all the different joints with like all the lines,
yeah,
everything lines up like fucking perfect.
yeah. I'm
Yeah.
pretty proud of that one, and I will be
That's
completely.
you should
I
be.
would. I'll be honest with you on that one too. There was very little stock removal when joining things back up. I actually went and I did an apple cider vinegar
Nice.
before I did my
Like a
fourays,
pickle,
and
right?
yep, and just and hardly removed anything. So in that type of a situation, you might have some decarb on those joining lines, but that
Right.
usually gets worked out when you stretch it all out.
Yep,
So that's the only way you can get that to match up is if you're not
for
doing like
sure.
really any grinding on it.
Yeah, we'll pull that back up. Yeah, and honestly, I've started doing pickling, kind of a pickling process to get rid of that or that forge scale without really grinding into that pattern because that is an aspect that messes with what's going on in your pattern. A lot of people ask me if I use a surface grinder to clean up my billets. When I first started making Damascus, like, yeah, I was like, this is great. I'll just use this. It's going to be flat. Everything comes back together. Great. But what I
Mhm.
didn't anticipate is that even if the other side of the billet is off by a 16th of an inch over 24 inches, that will affect how that pattern mates back together. And so ever since then, and that was early on, that was 3 years, God, it was 7 years ago. So or actually farther longer than that. That was almost 10 years ago. But anyways, 3 years or 7 years ago in my experience of knife making. Anyways, yeah, I've gotten to the point just same as you're doing now is starting to use a pickling process in a way. And it's great that you have that hammer, because that by being able to finish with nice planishing blows to really not only flatten but kind of pop any forge scale that also adds distortion to that cross-sectional view of the billet, that really helps clean things up so that you are doing very minimal work to get things to fit back together and line back up uh,
Absolutely.
as cleanly as precisely as possible. And I'm going to be getting a little 55-pound Anye. And honestly, the one of the things I'm the most excited about for it is just to use it for the kind of like the last few forging processes to just planish the shit out of that thing, get it really nice, sharp corners, clean surfaces, and
Yeah.
then minimal grinding or pickling work before cutting and stacking it back up.
Yeah. Yeah, they're awesome machines. They're
Yeah.
awesome machines.
Okay. I think and then Mike also commented in here that he has one of your Kirdashis.
Oh, nice.
Um, yeah, he's Red Dragon Forge on Instagram. And then
Oh,
we were talking about the
yes.
Kirdashi that you were showing before. Um, or that we were, the first one with all the crazy, oh my god, where is it? Here it is. With all the like just the way everything matches up and it looks like a skeletal structure. And I
Mm,
told him this is why you had to step away for a second.
mhm.
That it reminded me of this artist that used to do all this aliens artwork and all this kind of like tubular and kind of like, I don't know. And I couldn't remember the artist's name. Artist name is H.R. Geiger. You might have even mentioned that artist earlier when we were talking or first starting out the conversation. But Geiger, yeah,
Yeah.
does a lot of that
Yeah.
work. That's really crazy and cool looking, and just visually looking at it is kind of, yeah. There's a lot to see, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You
Yeah.
could look at that work for hours, honestly,
Yeah.
and find all
Yeah.
kinds of little details.
Geiger's a huge influence for sure.
Yeah.
Uh, Sci-fi, all that stuff. It's great.
All right, and then Mike, I think what does he say? He says, I love how Jason uses negative space
Mm.
and to have his patterns floating in the steel. And honestly, I feel the same way. I really appreciate that aesthetic, and that it is not something you see very often. And it's cool that you use that kind of that negative space or the built-in borders to kind of frame that pattern so that again you kind of, especially when like Nick uses it or even if you're using it, you're controlling how that thing looks in the finished piece by building or kind of anticipating distortion and building in extra material to help control what distortion actually happens. Um, yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I was messing around with encasement when I was doing the four-way
casement,
star, I'll call them star or starfish type patterns or whatever.
sure,
But I was doing encasement by putting more, 1084 on the outside and
sure,
whatnot. Um, and and I think there's an example there somewhere's out there. There's like kind of a reverse style Tonto where I just was experimenting with excavating that pattern off.
mm,
It's very similar style,
okay,
but there's one in particular out there. You might be able to find it on my site, but it's
sure,
where the pattern is just swimming through. And what I did is I
mm,
forged out the rough shape and then I ground into it and just exposed this pattern, excavated this pattern. And it's only along the blade side. So that was a really fun experiment
oh
with
crazy,
using negative space. If you guys can find that at some point. Um,
right,
but then, uh, yeah, on the Diablo pistol, the twist patterns. I think it's just a different. It's it's different, and that's what people notice.
it's
Like
different in a very good way,
yeah, like a lot of people are shy from, and I was shy about going and using different stock,
sure,
different size stock back in the day when I first started out. But as soon as I did, that's what caught people's eye,
right,
seeing the variance in line thickness. And I think that's just one thing, as a pattern maker, I'm noticing that isn't explored as much, and
I
and
agree,
I encourage other people to do that.
absolutely, yeah, and I love. I feel like we have somewhat of a similar philosophy, or I don't know if it's philosophy or just like approach, but it's taking what are seemingly simple shapes and lines, but recombining them and putting them back together in either unusual, like new ways, or unconventional ways, which are still typical uses, but just especially like some of these like just that people are not used to seeing, and because of that lack of familiarity with that kind of use or orientation or combination, that's creating a sense of confusion, and which is, it plays to the benefit of you. It's hard to see it as various pieces put together. You just see it as a composition altogether as one, and that adds to kind of some of the visual magic that's happening when you look at some of these patterns, especially the work that you're doing. And so I
I
commend
appreciate
you.
it.
I commend you, sir,
Thank you. Thank you.
for
Yeah.
confusing us all.
So I mean, that being said, I would be really psyched to, eventually maybe this year try to get together to do some kind of session with you,
Oh yeah,
explore some of these patterns together.
right.
Um, Maybe we could start talking about that at some point.
Absolutely. I would love that. I would love that. And yes, I think I'll probably be back up actually in the Northeast again around October, for Maker Camp, and I think that would be a prime time to coordinate and some time to hang with you and do some work with you. I think I might be talking to Zach about coming and teaching again at his shop, and maybe even doing some not only collaboration but maybe some teaching with you too,
Oh yeah,
up in Maine.
absolutely.
Be some fun stuff. All right. Well, I think we did it. We're at 2 hours and almost 45 minutes. Um,
Yeah.
I know I don't think this is a thing that you do very often, going into people's podcasts or doing video chats and stuff like that. So I
Oh,
really appreciate you putting yourself out there, and taking this chance with me. I hope it was a good experience and that you had a good time. I
it,
know I definitely had a great time. Oh, sorry,
it,
go
it
ahead.
was it was a great experience, Marco. I appreciate it. Yes, I'm not used to talking about myself this much, but
Sure.
it's been a great experience. And thank you so much for your kind words and support. I'm so honored to be part of your calendar. Yeah, I really would like to organize some shop time with you
Hell yeah.
or a class at some point whenever
Hell
you're ready.
yeah. Yeah, and I know that it feels, and I honestly I hate talking about myself too. And so when I wanted this experience for you to be, just storytelling time, really. I mean, because like I said, we've had some interactions, but not a ton. And so this is basically an opportunity for us to chat. And basically, if we were in person, we'd probably also like have a drink or otherwise and just hanging out and bullshitting the same exact way, and talking about our approaches and philosophies and inspirations and backgrounds and all that same stuff. We're just doing it together here. So again, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this with me. I know it's getting late over there. It's probably getting close to dinner time. So I'll let you go and get your time with the family and finish out your day. But again, I definitely got some takeaways and some great insights and inspiration from you, and not only before doing this conversation, but through the conversation and learning some of the little sneaky tips and tricks that you were willing to share on here. It means a lot, and hopefully, if people were paying good attention, they got those too. So, um, that's all we got. Thank you,
Th-
everybody. Appreciate all the
th-
support over on the Patreon. I'm sorry I keep cutting you off. Go ahead.
no, thank you so much. I appreciate everybody who's helping out with your podcast. That's great. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah, and yeah. I appreciate everybody who's part of the Patreon who helps support me to be able to have these conversations and to share them with you and to allow you to be part of this conversation and ask great questions of these extremely talented, knowledgeable, and skilled makers. And if you want any more information, you want to see more of this stuff, go to the Patreon, sign on up. Everything helps, and it really means a lot to me. So thank you all. Until next time, goodbye.